This is Jennifer Miller interviewing Daniel and Mildred Willis on January 9th, 2003 at their home in Hatteras Village.
They depended on Charles a lot for...
I think I have heard, yeah.
He died.
We've interviewed a lot of people down here, and a lot of people, I think they sort of stretch the truth a little bit. I don't go along with that. That's not history.
Mm-hmm.
See, it didn't make the story more interesting.
I have heard that from most of the people I've come to interview now, and that's been one concern among the people that...
Well, we're reading some of the material. He might not read as much as I, and there is an Ellsworth family.
Right.
So it's not important to some, maybe not, but it was a little bit important.
Oh, sure, of course. Absolutely. Well, it's important to everyone.
And
that's,
children, I think, know.
I think that's one reason they want to get the transcripts back to the people, because that way you'll have a chance to look over it well before the final reports are done to see what the information contains. Because I think one problem, too, with the interview process might be that, especially with some of the older folks, their accents were fairly thick. And Burris and Balance, I can see where someone who's just taking notes, or maybe they're not recording, they might hear it wrong.
Now, I honestly think that the person that wrote that didn't know anything.
Oh, I see.
And the first Wade, they come from the Wade family, but they write really well. Mm-hmm. And some of the things, they probably get their information from some of the...
Her father, Mr. Fredstell, got a plane with a person standing alongside of it with General Mitchell, and that's her father.
Oh, okay.
The fisherman. And he did the weather and the tides, didn't have instruments then. He'd go out in the middle of the night and he'd look at the stars and the moon, and he sort of studied the weather like that. And I think that's why General Mitchell liked him, because he went with him and they were studying the weather and the tides for the bombing. I think that was their intention. And I with him too. He flew with General Mitchell. Charles, her brother, was named after that Charles Danford, General Mitchell's pilot.
Okay.
And
yes.
She had some pictures that her father had.
His name wrong.
His name was Charles Danford. Well, his true shows. Anyway, Josephine had pictures.
Do you know any of the ways that he read the weather? What do you know? Any things that he used?
By the tides, the moon.
See, the moon rules the tide.
The moon rules the tide.
And I did that. He'd go out at night. He studied it.
Well,
they had to work with the weather. It's just like a hurricane. When a hurricane popped up, they knew exactly. They knew in their mind how the weather worked, where that hurricane was going.
It was working the ocean.
And
pretty accurate with their predictions?
They were.
Very accurate.
First weather station they had here, the old medical center up there, they had a weather station in that one time. And this is a story I heard from older people. They said they were in there watching the weather maps, you know, and they were talking about how the hurricane, and some of them kind of spit on the side and said the hurricane would go in such a place, walked on out and left it. Sure enough it did, just like they said. But when you study the weather like it, you learn. People now, they can't even go out in a boat without some kind of GPS or some kind of electronic instrument. But you used to, that's all you went by. You had a compass and that was it. Some of them fished even without compasses. They knew the direction. They went by the sun, the wind, and everything else. Things have changed so much. I think that's why a lot of the old local people resents people moving in so much. And when they come in, they change the landmarks. Everything's changing, moving. And
time did that happen here?
Mostly World War II. That's when the women started going out in the factories working, and
Not right here in Hatteras,
No,
but
right
they
here
did.
they didn't.
They had, well, I mean, they needed the women to
but
work.
the women
Right.
here always helped their husbands fish. They helped them. They didn't go out fishing, but they you couldn't run off somewhere and buy a piece of net already made. They made their nets.
Sure.
My mother's made a many of nets.
People made a living, a lot of people made their living just
That's something that was generally done in the family, that the wife would make the nets for the husband to
Well, a
fish,
lot
or
of
was it
times
something that people did for money?
The women helped each other.
I know of one family, Mark and Ryder.
Were there many others that had a business like
There
that?
probably was. I just remember them because they lived near the people, like you were saying, that used nets.
Killing it now. Headed back in the Depression, would he'd get a boatload of fish and oysters and clams. Then he'd take them up in the rivers and trade them off to the farmers.
Oh.
He'd go up in the rivers and trade it off for anything they wanted to trade, whether it was chickens, cows, pigs, whatever they had.
What rivers? What area exactly did he do this?
They'd go up Neuse River, up towards Little Washington, and they'd go up the other way up Alligator River.
Family could go.
I remember over in Bath, I've gone with them when they've gone over to Bath, and that's one place I remember. Bath is an old town. And first Louisiana coffee I ever saw, my father bought it there at a store. And my uncle had a grocery store here, and he got him to order some of it. The old Louisiana coffee.
What exactly is the Louisiana coffee?
Do what?
What exactly is Louisiana coffee? Is it different than the coffee we know today?
It's just different names. Like now they got Nescafe.
Oh,
They got
okay,
different
it was
names.
brand names.
That was called Louisiana.
Okay.
And then they started stocking it in the stores around here. Had several stores here.
Which stores do you remember when you were small?
My uncle had one, Irish Willis. Then the Odens had a store which
That was really
was,
Jasper,
yeah, that was Mr. Litchfield. And then Mr. Ken Oden, he got it from him because he married Mr. Litchfield's daughter. And that store's been going on ever since. See, Mark Oden has it now,
It's still in the Oden family.
but it's still in the Oden family.
Where is it? Which one?
It's Nito's.
It's
name.
Nito's
Oh,
now.
Nito's,
Yeah,
okay.
he changed it to Nito. Then they had one down the road. That was John Meekins.
John Meekins.
Robinson
It was
stores
first
there.
John Meekins, and then it was,
Reuben Balance had one that he got from Mr. Bascom.
his father.
But he got it from his father, Bascom,
And that's right there
or
where.
Balance. That's right there where Midgett Realty's at. Not, it's the Marlin Motel's there now.
Okay, yes.
Right there by the,
And that used to be that store?
yeah. Now, Horace's, it was there.
The red and
That's
white.
still
Okay.
Rizzo's store.
That belonged to,
Was the Burrs red and white started, do you think?
1800s, yeah.
Wow.
they had that.
I guess I know it's one of the oldest that's still going right now.
It is.
It's over 100-year-old
It's the oldest name.
in the family.
And then the other one that,
It's right across from the sheriff's department.
that's Josephine's father,
Oh, okay.
That was a grocery store.
across from the school building.
Is it the one that was the Hotline Thrift Shop
Yeah,
building?
mhm,
Okay.
same one. Yeah.
All right.
That's an old store. That's
Mhm.
been there for
It's a
years.
neat old building. I love that
Yeah,
building.
used to live. They lived in a place right there next to it, and
It's only the
years later they redone the upstairs, and
Each one of those, you remember those freight boats?
we used to call them freight boats.
We
They'd go
remember
in the
we
Little
had
Washington,
that
and they'd come back and they'd go in Elizabeth City, and they'd bring freight back They bring that freight and stuff back. They started off, they used horse and carts. That's what they used to haul the,
Well,
that's all they had for the trucks and stuff started coming in.
another thing interesting beyond that, after that before, is because he couldn't drive.
But
City back then. He was first by name.
Now you say from on the island to...
The whole Outer Banks,
Okay.
including Oakland.
boats together,
Uh-huh.
tied them together and carried, that's how they carried that truck over. It goes there light into the
It was the
Mama
first
City.
motorized vehicle on Hatteras Island.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the older people did.
They probably
Yeah, they know it.
but,
Around what time was this happening, where he got the first
my
vehicle
father,
In the
and that was
20s.
married 1919, so,
The 20s.
No, I have not.
well, he drove it out on the ice, and I've heard him say how.
Ice, what would
It
happen?
froze over. The whole sound would
Oh,
freeze over, and you had to go out about 3 miles before you got to place you could put a boat in the water.
Okay.
The ice was so thick. It'd be 3 and 4 foot thick.
See, that's where the light
And
came in right here.
They've even pulled their small boat. They didn't have over a 16 or 17 foot boat back then. They used sailboats. And they pulled them with horse and carts, pull them out on back of that reef. But Mr. Fred drove his truck out there one time. When they got a truck, he drove a truck out there on it.
He's right about the horse and carts.
They hauled supplies with them. And I remember David.
Vegetables for sale and things, or supplies. That's
He used to come down and bring meat. He'd bring beef on the back of a cart, and you just told him you wanted a pound of meat, or he just cut it off. He didn't care what you got, where he got a shoulder or rear end.
Did
You
it
know
have
what
any
they got.
kind of ice on it, or?
Yeah, no, it was cold. They deliver on cold days mostly.
They killed in the cold weather.
Frisco was a small area then. It's mostly Hatteras and Buxton, and of course you had to pass through Frisco.
Only about 2 families were there?
Well, the Vastnets, I remember the Vastnets, this is between Hatteras and Buxton more. It looked like it used to, but the road went right to the edge of the woods.
What's that strip?
Yeah, it went down.
It went all along the shore,
I
down
went-
to Brigham's Bay.
I went and talked to
There was
Mr.
a little
Chubby
tiny
Doris,
field.
and he had the
That's the way
Basnet
the cars
Cemetery across the street.
navigated. The cars went that way.
Even Basnet can tell you right much about that area too, because he was,
Going properly. The
There
battery
was
can-
more than 2 families, I just said that because
from the 30s.
villages was made up mostly by the Coast Guard stations. They called them life stations then. And it's like all up Rodanthe in Salvo is where there's a Coast Guard station. The men built little houses up there for their families, and they just started growing.
the
And,
Hoopers in Salvo,
The villages got started by those stations. And we call Creech Hill, it's still there between here and Frisco. It's still there, and a lot of those people lived in Frisco.
Creech Hill?
Yeah, still there. It's
it's dwelling.
when you go out of the village toward Frisco, it'll be the first building you come to on your right.
Okay.
Then they got the big homes along the beach.
I think I
The
know
little
which
gray
one.
square.
Yeah, I know exactly
That was
which one.
Creech Hill Station.
Okay.
Of course, you know Dolan.
Those stations planted on down, and the people built villages around them. It's like
They're not right, I say, during World War II. Very far, you'll find it.
Mildred, what was your mother's name?
Fanny Peel.
Fanny Peel, okay.
my father's name was Tyne.
Tyne?
T-I-N-E.
Valentine.
Valentine is what his name. And mother was Nancy. She was an Austin. They asked me one time, he was an ambassador out of Washington for Argentina, and he asked me if I knew a Josephus Willis, which I said, yeah, I had a brother named Josephus. He said, well, this was way back in the 1800s. I said, well, that had to be my great-grandfather, or my grandfather, my father's father. And he told me he's reading a book about it. And we ordered the book off the internet, and it was my grandfather. It was, why they got a story about him, he caught a big whale. That was back when they were whaling in the 1800s. And he caught one, and they called it the Mayflower, because they named whales like we name hurricanes.
Oh, okay.
And that was, what is it, the day the Mayflower come over?
Not sure.
Some way, I don't remember how the story went now, but it's, they got the name from the Mayflower boat ship.
Wow.
And that's what it named it, because it happened to be on the birthday of that ship or something.
Okay.
And they called that the Mayflower.
Now, where did this happen? Was that locally?
That was mostly on Portsmouth Island.
Okay.
They did all their whaling. And that's a good book. It's, the name of it is Seasoned by Salt.
Seasoned by Salt.
See, look, they got a nice picture of my grandfather in it.
Josephus.
Yeah, he was, it's a little funny. When I first saw the picture, I thought, Lord, he's raggy some. His shirt, he had a shirt on full of holes. But if you notice in the picture, he's got the string running up over his shoulder and comes out of holes on his shirt. When they mended their net, they didn't use needles like we use, put line on it and string it in. The nets were so big, I guess. Now they just had a big ball of it, and to keep it in one piece, it come up across his shoulder, and they kept using that one piece.
Huh.
And that's why his shirt was so full of holes. But I think we got the book in there about it. It tells a lot of stories about the beaches, about how the people used to whale hunt.
Did they do any of that into your time?
No. In our time, they went to more what we call pokey boats. They still got them. They go out here for Manhattan, and there's some Hayden boats, and most of them comes out of Morehead City, because they got factories down there to make fertilizer.
Okay.
And but they used to have nothing but colored people on those big boats. And we could sit around here eating nights when the wind was calm and they would be fishing. They sung by rhythm, and they pulled the net in by rhythm. And they'd sing. You could hear them singing all those boats, they'd all sing the same song, and here they just pulled their net in by...
And you could hear that?
Yeah.
Huh.
And it seemed like it just covered the whole island. Just
wow.
This island is strange, but something on. But see, we have the dunes now.
There's times you can get out offshore right now, and when you're coming in, if the weather's right, you can see almost downhill. You can see the island sort of downhill. It looks like it's downhill the way you're going.
Wow. So when you go into the ocean, and it looks like it's kind of rising up and going.
Yeah.
It is. Huh.
The older people, like my father.
They did that, and that's the only storm we've ever had that really caused that much trouble. When that tidal wave, Emily, it was just a big tidal wave come in, a 10.5-foot wave come in across the village, and it just swept the island, and it stopped at the sand hills, which I guess if it wasn't for them sand hills, it would have kept on going. But that's one storm in 100 years caused that. I mean, those sand hills still worth keeping.
They kept the tides from ebbing and flowing every time we went across the places we had to pass through.
wind gets southeast, even like it's been this week, we called it sea tide would run over. And we got more ocean tide than we did sun tide.
So the dunes helped with that?
Yeah, so the dunes have kept all that out. You don't get a tide every time the wind shifts.
Sure.
And like I say, Emily is the only one at 93, is the only storm we've ever had that has
It went in every high stand.
really hit the place.
You know, it's built like they used to build.
Homes down here was underwater.
It changed my life.
We had 8 inches in here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had to do
Had 100 yards of carpet.
I think it was the
Didn't even get a chance to enjoy it before that storm got floated it right up. And we had to take it out.
about a year, I think. Anyone's lifetime that we know about.
Hatteras, I guess all up down the beach, is when they started bringing drag lines in and digging ponds and filling in property. The houses used to be, if you give somebody a piece of land or something, it's just like this marshland out here. They've got little knolls on it, little high ground all over it. And that's where people built. They built on those high grounds. And they used little footbridges from one house to the other.
Oh, wow. Our bridges were like that.
I remember from here to her house, down the road here by, when you go in by Levin Poulter's, you had to cross a bridge on the main road to get over to his house. You had to cross a bridge from his house to get to my grandfather's house. Then you had to walk around my uncle's house. He didn't want you to go through his yard, so you had to walk through mud and water to get to a bridge as you go over to another house. And then in his house, you had to cross the bridge to get to her house.
Yeah.
Then you had to take another bridge to get to the highway or the road on the back road.
At night, but you could go all the way around the road where the cars ride.
Houses was built on little
Those other
knolls.
places were shortcuts.
And like I say, they had road there, but you couldn't get through it dry-footed.
Some of them, though, were beyond wherever there was a road.
Our home was down by the Hatteras Sands campground.
And that same body of water gone.
That's where they rebuilt the house that my sister was raised in that house. She was born in, I think she was about 2 to 3 weeks old when her home burnt down. And my father built that new one, and that was right in where that old trailer is out here when you first come in. I say it was a horse and carts that used those roads. They didn't have the automobiles, and it just kept the roads tore up all the time, just full of mud and water. And not too many years ago, the state come in and paved the road. Back when back during the Depression, when they had WPA, is what we called them, men threw up ditch banks, we call them. Just threw up a pile of dirt, dug from each side of the road and built a path, or a dry path instead of bridges. They replaced the bridges.
Okay.
That's what they did. Just
what did that do to the landscape if they were essentially filling in the wetlands where the bridges were? Did that was that a good thing because it made life easier, or did it change the water flows?
Then when the state started coming in and taking over, they started bringing dirt in and filling in, and then drag lines are the one that's mostly dug all these ditches for people get those drag lines, and they start filling in their lots and making lots. And
what the WP?
They would throw the dirt up and make sort of a path like up high, but they also use that place where they dug out that ditch. They dug out to drain the bigger ditches.
Oh, I see.
it would drain it and keep those drained on kind of mosquitoes, I guess.
There were a few what we call ditches that were laying by.
All out here, we used to be a big ditch out there, and we moved back down here. We dredged out of the slash here and had all that filled in. About all this property is filled property. But every piece of land on Hatteras has been filled, been made.
What?
Anytime you got a low body, low place, and you got water coming in it, it just, water's going to come on around it. Your tide's going to come in there first. The tide's going to come in the lowest point, and it just fills him up quicker and spills over onto you.
It didn't happen after the Danes. See, we could see, now, from my home, we could see the ocean.
You see, it's come in right about the time the WPA did, at the Civilian Conservation Corps. They come in, they had a camp up here in Buxton, and they built sand fences, and those sand fences were put all down the beach. That's what built the sand dunes. You had one crew maybe up in Currituck would cut brush. They'd clear a field out for the farmers, and they'd use the brush and the limbs and stuff and make those old fences, and they'd bring them down, and Park Service would use that system now. They wouldn't have to worry so much about these beaches, but they're afraid they'll ruin the beauty of the beach by putting stuff out. They'd rather for it to go away than try to save it. Bad thing to say.
I think these inlets can go soft.
You can't fight Mother Nature.
The drains went through Portsmouth, and you know that tide coming in on Gustav and the way it was acting? Were you here in Gustav?
No. I've been here, coming up on 3 years.
Yeah, but this Gustav was just this year.
Oh, okay. Oh, I was actually out of town that week. I missed that week.
Well, it was just like Emily, only on a smaller scale.
Back of the shed, and it had the shed filled up before it even was covered out here in the front.
It is backed up the same way though, only not quite.
Well, they don't have as much room to just cut
And
through.
Hatteras Inlet is size of what it is.
People tries to fight Mother Nature instead of working with it. You can't win when you're fighting Mother Nature. It's the original plans for that Dorgan Inlet was supposed when you come in south and you first get on it over on Nag's Head side, that bridge is running like it should have run to start with and going on out in the sound and around. But instead of that, they had some smart person, I guess, decided to turn it more and cross the inlet. Take a shortcut across the inlet and run it right through the tide. And that's one reason you can't.
Can you tell where the inlet is really there?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, you can tell where it is, and they put the
The boats in Oregon Inlet, the charter boats, I think used to come out, summer's about the fourth opening under the bridge. It's where they come out of the cove there where they tie up there and come right around that point and go out to the inlet. And now it's a quarter of a mile down before they get out. But that's where they used to go out at, right under that bridge. All they do is drop their outriggers and go right under the bridge.
They're planning
And
it, aren't they?
there's no bridge that's ever been built down here yet that didn't fill in when they put those pilings down and started. Because sand don't move. I mean, it don't dissolve like mud. It just moves from one place to the other. And if you try to block it, it's bad. I mean, that's why the sand fish is that good. The wind can blow through them, but it held the sand. and build them up. And when you get one layer built, you can put more on top of it and keep going up. You can build a mountain.
And that's how the inlets fill in with the bridges there.
And the bridge, when you put something down the inlet, that tide sweeping through there is going to dig around it. It's going to take the sand somewhere else.
They didn't keep dredging.
And
They're constantly
worried doing stupid things, which maybe they think it's the right way to do, but I think somebody setting up somewhere in the office that's never been here before should ask people and get information.
Sure.
That's what General Mitchell got his information.
You've been here 3 years.
He asked people.
Yeah, about that.
Well, it's before it was signed in. Those marshes were oil.
He had fresh water starting from down here all the way to Buxton. Freshwater ponds.
Oh, did you? And is that changed with all the filling in?
And they have dug so much and filling. It's like Buxton now. They have dredged out so much there. I don't know where those ponds are fresh anymore. Not in
I
Buxton.
don't think so.
Used to be good bass fishing. And when you get freshwater bass on Hatteras, people think you're crazy. But it used to be one of the best bass water holes you could find right there in Buxton.
And they still do, because that's where the lighthouse was.
All these ponds out here was all fresh water. We used to go out there ice skating when we were little.
Were they more on the ocean
That's
side?
not it.
Yeah, over on the ocean side.
Beyond the back road.
The other road that's on the other side of them, between that and the ocean.
It was all marshy area, but if you went down, there were like winters that might be not even a freeze.
Yeah, that was one of my questions after that was, does it ever get cold enough to freeze up for safe ice skating and
It
things?
don't
I guess
get
so.
cold like it used to did. We have cold weather,
It's like it comes in
but
bubbles.
it used to, the whole harbor down would freeze solid. There'd be 3 and 4 foot of ice over the harbor.
That year,
And
1970s.
it would freeze way out into the sound, like I say, it'd go out as much as 3 miles and freeze solid. Freeze hard enough for horses and carts
Sure.
to go out on, walk on it.
Yeah, they've had some terrible winters.
And I've seen the harbor right down here now. It's froze solid, like I say, 3 foot of ice. And I guess the last time it really froze was in the late 60s, 69
Yeah, maybe early 70s.
and 70s. We had a freeze, but it didn't freeze solid. It was ice, but it wasn't enough to block the boats from going. The Coast Guard boat come in and broke it up a little bit, broke the ice up so the smaller boats could get out.
Killed the fish, though.
Yeah, it killed the fish.
Oil and things.
When it gets cold like that, the fish, they smother, and they'll come up looking for air, and I've seen them come right up through the ice, jump right up through the ice, and then they die laid right up on top of the ice.
Did you ever collect them that way
Yeah.
to be eaten?
People did. They go around with a net and pick them up. They did that on the beach. Same time it got cold, the water got cold, and caught fish close into the beach, and trout and bluefish go right up and wash up on the beach. People drive right down the truck and pick them up and throw them in the back.
Sounds like easy fishing to me.
Yeah. It is. Oh. Josephus
Josephus.
was on my father's side, and Olivia, his wife was named Olivia. Styler.
His parents?
Yeah.
Okay.
And my mother was Harmon Austin, and Pete was her husband.
And you, instead of the village, his family over there, we got in Beaufort, I think, was it Beaufort his mom?
Carter
Carter
County.
County, anyway, and she gathered history. And
Her school record had a story on it.
I think that was interesting. We
It was because her father was a carpenter and he worked there?
Yeah.
Well, he went where, it was
Portsmouth
was a going place.
that used to be the biggest area up and down the coast. Had more business going on.
Yeah, it is,
It's
very
so
much
small.
Well, another thing, Hatteras was,
People, the porpoise factory was mostly to get oil,
yeah,
porpoise oil, and people gets that confused because years later, those people was from up north where they caught porpoises live ones.
well, that was from a father involved in that.
And they used to have a pound. They made a pound up here by the bridge, up by the Channel Bass restaurants. They had a big pound up there, and people would go out and catch porpoises. They'd bring them in, put them in that pound, and then they'd haul them off in trucks to keep them alive until they get them up north. And I don't know just where they carried them, but
Yeah, that was to do, what, brain research? Was that what it was? Or
I don't know
just
what
in
that was
general?
for. That was in the 30s, wasn't it? Very possible the government could have had something to do with that because they trained porpoises.
They came from Canada.
Catch those porpoises and take them up here and put them in pounds. And that's in there right there, right up by the bridge, right there by the medical center.
The place was a girls' club. It was made.
Girls Club there.
And later it was a hospital.
His wife, I guess, still living. She was excellent. The children's doctors. Still down in Lake Placid, Florida.
What did your grandparents do for a living? You said Josephus was a fisherman.
Mostly all fish.
All
He was a carpenter.
Harmon, he was a carpenter.
How do you spell that? Is it, I had Harmon or Harum?
No, he was Harmon.
Okay.
There is a Hiram Austin.
Oh, call him Harm.
And
That's
his
how
wife's
I-
name was Cynthia? Is that correct?
That was his wife's name.
Okay.
Harmon Austin
He was in Austin.
and Cynthia Wade.
Okay. What about your grandparents, ma'am? What did they do?
I give you their name.
Okay.
Walter Berry.
Okay.
How the Willises was?
Mhm.
Her parents married a Willis. Not married, she married a Willis.
Mary Ella Simpson Willis.
Okay. Ivy, but her father?
Ivy was her father.
Okay. Fisherman as well? Generally, or? My little tape recorder is having trouble here. It stops and starts and stops and starts, so it might not be getting what we're talking about very well.
You haven't heard much from us anyway.
Oh yeah, this has been great so far. This has been good. I haven't even had to ask you many questions. I like that when people talk.
Before my mother died, she was pushing 90, and 4 or 5 old ladies come over to see her one day, and I went back in her bedroom for something, and they got talking, and I'd give anything in this world if I'd had a recorder, even a movie camera, something took their picture and just set it there and let them talk. They didn't even know I was in the place. Their minds went back to when they were children, little girls playing. And they got talking about the things they'd done and the things they played with. And like I say, they didn't even know I was there. Their mind was so far back. And I'd give anything in this world if I'd had a recorder right then to have just set it up and copied all of that they were talking about.
Yeah, it's invaluable.
He was blessed. His mother lived to be 86 years.
They were up past the red and white going on up in the village. They said you couldn't even see the sun. There's so many trees. Well, we remember that. There's so many trees in there. But my mother said here, the only place you could find any sun here was go clear out on the beach.
Wow.
Trees go clear down to the beach. And right now they find tree stumps out on the beach.
Well, Dan, I remember down when you
It was all heavy trees back there.
And it was trees, big.
Storms just killed them out.
the storms then that have done it,
Yeah.
not development, or was it a combination?
They're mostly storms. It's
Oh,
like
wow.
Frisco. You ride through Frisco now, all you see dead trees.
That happened in Emily.
And
Oh.
That was.
all those trees back in Emily, back in '93, it's killed all those trees out.
It takes a good 50 years.
Put in building, clearing their lots, that kills them out too.
Mhm.
Because nobody likes pine trees. They're so
Well,
messy.
If they're native to the area, they let them.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
I
And
got
you see more.
there's a Japanese pine there, and I wished a many a time it weren't there.
Every pine that's on this yard's planted.
Mhm.
The island's got a lot of springs in it, underground water. And I think that's why so much freshwater ponds is growing. It's right in the, I know there's one down the road here they call the Green Pond. It's freshwater springs in it.
Mhm.
And I could almost go right to it right now if it's still there.
What was that?
They call it the Green Pond. That's down by the Assembly of God Church. It used to be all fresh water, and then it sort of leaked through over, and then another pond on the other side of the back road here, and that had freshwater springs in it.
Mhm. Now,
And
do
like I
people
say,
use that for their water supplies, these freshwater ponds, or?
no, but places right close to them, everybody here depended on rainwater for their water,
Mhm.
and there was a few places had pumps that had good water.
Mhm.
And Mr. Billy Stowe, over here on the back road, he had real good water,
It was high and red sand.
and it was all big high hills over there, red sand, and out, we called that the Point. It's about the last places going out of Hatteras on your left.
Mhm.
Back in there, they had good water, and they used it up until not too long
That's
ago.
where the other Hiram Worston,
It,
Oh, okay.
that was the family that lived out there.
it got salt, their water did, and bad, and they've never even hooked up to the city water until just right recently.
Hmm.
They've used their own
You
well
notice
water.
Last summer, their well,
Out.
that's the first time that's ever happened.
You might not know it, but even to our water system, right there in Frisco, when they pump those wells down, it's draining our water.
Of course it does.
It's draining our water.
Hmm.
I've heard people talk about their gardens up
Well,
there.
that's where their water went.
They don't have water for their gardens. Their wells are going dry. It said those deep wells that the county's using now is just pulling all the water.
That's what we did the
And
ocean
it's,
thing with our water. And it was good drinking water. And everybody just about went happy.
Well,
This summer, the pump started acting.
We're going over there to Mr. Billy's and getting water. My father, we've gone over there and put it in barrels. And I remember trying to put my arm around to hold the barrel, keep the water from sloshing out when you come in.
Those hills that sort of have washed away a lot. Your uncle Billy, you just did Mr. Billy.
Yeah, just throw that thing away.
Yeah, it's really acting up on me today. It's just spitting and stopping and starting. I could just take notes here. That's fine too, I guess. But it's a shame to miss a recording. Telling me a lot of good stories. Once you hear
I
it's
get
running.
lost. We'll sit down again sometime. Give us a break.
Sybil, Skakel, the one,
Skakel,
called
is
me.
Sybil
Sybil.
Skakel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Her parents is the one that owned that Austin
And,
store up here. It used to be the Hotline.
Okay, all right.
Sybil Austin Skakel.
That was his father. Her father
She
owned
called
that.
me, I reckon been 2 years ago, and
Yeah.
this history died because it's a bad time, when the
Mhm.
stock market, all because people really,
Englehart Bank, which is now East Carolina, is about the only bank that stayed open that we know anything about.
that we could find out.
The rest of them closed,
On
but
Black
that
Monday,
stayed open.
Black
and-
Monday, they ordered all banks to closed, and Englehart Bank did.
They're still going. They call it East Carolina now.
It's small, it stayed kind of small.
And they are very cautious.
That's probably been its salvation.
If you got $1 million, they'll loan you 100.
Yeah, if you can get a money loan, they're doing well.
They're real cautious about what they do.
But that was what I was
Right,
saying.
sure.
But what she was interested in, and I was able to tell her.
Do you know anything about that mattress making? Did they use the seaweed from the sound?
No,
Okay.
they just sent the ticket and the content money.
I don't know if we ain't got one of the mattresses now.
Your mother used them.
Went over and had it. The bugs hadn't eaten it.
I wonder what happened to those mattresses. Were they for the people here to use, or were they sold?
Yeah.
Here to use.
Okay, so the mattresses and clothes that were made were actually
They were
used here.
used here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like we've always, I know you've heard us say over the Coast Guard.
Merchants, they run charge accounts.
They did, but
Mostly
they still
here,
made-
you depended on your early spring fishing and your summer fishing,
They got paid.
and most of the time you had an account with a grocery store and you bought your groceries, and they would carry you until they'd carry all through winter to slack times until you started making money. And then you paid your bill up and start going in debt again.
But they were the people that their homes were kept up. I can remember that. People had a living, but it was sporadic.
Right. Sure.
There were no expense. Different. Most of them were the wireless.
I don't think so.
All right, you know where Fessenden Center is? That was Fessenden. That's where.
What was the wireless, like the telegraph, or?
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, that's where the telephone came from.
Right, okay.
Started on the Outer Banks.
They used like during the war, the Coast Guard used that.
The guard station used to have doctors.
It was Navy. See, the Navy was over by where
They've always had doctors here.
over where Fessenden.
He's out
Yeah,
under Buxton by the lighthouse, the old Coast Guard base out there now used to be a naval base.
They had an important.
Like all that Coast Guard housing,
That was
where
all
that is,
Navy.
used to be Navy base out there. They had Navy housing. They had a CC camp there, at Civilian Conservation Corps. It's always been government property out there.
And with this thing acting up, I'm almost thinking I might want to schedule another time with you. That might be all right. I hate to do that. But I'd like to get a good, clear recording.
I don't know of anything.
This is Jennifer Miller interviewing Daniel and Mildred Willis at their home in Hatteras Village on January 21st, 2003. Tape 1. I thought I'd start by asking you about some of the herbs and healing things that your mother did. You were telling me about that last time as you were wrapping things up, Mildred.
I know she used red balsam in a liquid form. And when we had like bronchitis or anything like that, you know, what they call them, other things, different things now, but we just always called it cold and bronchitis and croup. And she'd take that red balsam and take a spoon of sugar and put a drop of the red balsam on it, and we'd swallow it, and it would help. And of course, they still use mustard plaster, I suppose, or mustard oil. You know, that came out when we were in grammar school. They came out with Vicks salves and mentholatum, I think, in little containers to advertise with, and that was used a lot. The Vicks salve was. It still is.
Now, how did they use the Vicks salve?
They would rub it on your chest and then put a piece of flannel over top of it to hold it. But you shouldn't go out. You know, we were kept in bed when we got sick in those days. We were kept in bed if we had a fever. And now they go to school with the fever. And
every spring you could look for cod liver oil.
They're drinking cod liver oil, but that's come back.
They give you stuff like that, and it just kept you well. And if you got a cold, you better look out. Here comes castor oil.
They use camphor a lot. You know what camphor is, I guess, camphor gum. They use that a lot, and they would. I'm not real sure how they made the liquid. What would you call it? Liniment, I suppose, would be the name for it that they made with the camphor gum, and I'm not real sure what that preparation was, but it smelled really good. And they would use that to rub aches and pains with. So
the red balsam, was that pine?
I'm not sure what it was. It was just a tincture that came, like the store we were telling you about, Mr. Oden's store. He dealt in a few of those things like that.
Okay.
That was what it was, just a tincture. I'm not sure. I suppose it was some kind of balsam.
That was another question, was where did they get the supplies? Did the general stores carry a few things?
Well, he carried, I remember him carrying it, and it came from Elizabeth City.
Okay.
He told you the other day about the freight boats. It came in on freight boats, and
Everything came in on boats.
and not until after the war did you see prescription drugs. We never knew anything about a prescription drug until after 1942, 43. Aspirin came out of the war, penicillin, and sulfur drug, and most of all that. Now, it wasn't used here. I don't know where it was anywhere else or not. But the war changed a lot after the late 40s and 50s really did a lot of changing in the way people were taken care of by doctors, because when we were living here, there were plenty of times we didn't even have a medical doctor on the island. And then there would be government doctors, you know, that were here taking care of the government people, and they would also take care of the general public too. Now, when both he and I were born, we had a doctor, Dr. Kenfield, and he wasn't his doctor, but he was my mother's doctor when I was born, and he stayed. When was it Dr. Crankfield came? Let's see.
In the late 30s.
Yeah, and Dr. Crankfield came, and he used a little place up here where the clinic is now, and did operations. He did surgery.
Wow.
He had
They had
appendicitis operation.
appendicitis. He hit here just about the time everybody had appendicitis. And a lot of people think it was just something he was doing to draw people in, operate on them, and some of them went up to the hospital and found out that it's just
Like an
epidemic.
epidemic.
Everybody.
It was like an epidemic.
Everybody got appendicitis.
My sister, about 6 months before he came, went to Washington, all the way over to Washington for an operation. And there was no explanation as to why that infection occurred like that, but he was a godsend, I think. And I had stuck a nail in my head, not knowing that that's what I did, because they were taking this bridge up here apart so they could bring in equipment. I think it was something to do with that medical center that's there now. They were going to bulkhead it and build it up, build the land up, and they were bringing sort of a dredge in, and they had taken that bridge apart to get it in. And the way that we had to walk through, we had to kind of get under a beam, and I got under the beam and raised up too soon when I got on the other side, and I thought I bumped my head, and I just put my handkerchief up there, and there was a little bit of blood. Well, I didn't tell anyone about it, and my daddy had been away fishing, and he came to the store that was across from the school, and when I went over for recess break, he saw my head was swollen, called me over to him, and he said, what in the world is wrong with you? And I told him I had bumped my head. And the man that ran the store, Mr. Andrew Austin, he said the doctor had just come here, and he was in practice over where Dr. Kinfield had left. They had a little, it's still there, the building's still there, and they used that for the office, and his home is there too. It's still there. Dr. Burroughs did have it, and it's right across from the medical center.
Okay.
On the Flash.
All right.
And I'm not sure who has it now. But he took me over there, and he told him, he said, now I was his first patient.
Ah.
And he told my father, and I heard him say, I was 9 years old, but I was old enough to really understand. He said, we can do two things. He said, I can call for the seaplane and take her through this city, or I can take a chance on a massive dose of antitoxin that says it has tetanus or blood poisoning. And he said, I can send her up, but I don't think she'll make it. That I just think that. And Daddy told him to go ahead and do what he could do. And he gave me so much of that antitoxin that they couldn't get my clothes on. I had to sleep in my clothes for about 2 days.
Were you bloated from it?
No, I was just stiffened up.
Oh, I see.
And then I had to go and see him in the office, and my sister would go with me, and she said she couldn't bear to look. He used something that he had that would burn and would go into that area and clean that wound. He shaved my head up there and cleaned that wound out and tended to me and told me just to wash it with ivory soap and water. And it healed up. And he saved my life. He really did. And then the second patient he had was Nace Iron, and believe it or not, he did a mastoid operation on her. Now I think it's remarkable. That is
absolutely
really is remarkable. And we told you, that his wife was still living in Florida, and his son is a doctor.
That's right. I remember that. And during what time did he come here?
I was let's see.
Late 30s.
It was about 35, 36, 37 maybe. Let's see. It was 36, I believe, that I would have been his patient. And I think I know 1939 he was still here. 1938 he was still here. It's somewhere between. I know I was 9 years old, and I would have been 10 and 37. So it was.
When I went in to see him with appendicitis, I had a tooth broke in the front, and he pulled that tooth, took my tonsils out, and operated on appendicitis all at the same time.
Really?
He said, Mom will do it all while it's out.
There was a lady from Buxton that used to help him, and Juanita, I believe it was Juanita Field, she was a nurse. The girls that went to college from here became nurses, and the men mostly were merchants who went into it, followed their family into the store, because like Odense, it's still in the family. It's still Nido's, it's still in the family. And there were several good nurses that came in. Pauline Oden was one, and then I know Juanita Field. She married Jeanette.
Okay.
Her grandson is her son that runs that carpet place up there.
In Buxton? Okay.
That's Juanita.
So were a lot of the nurses actually local women that went away for education?
Yeah. They went, and I don't think Pauline ever, she may have stayed a while in the hospital there in Washington. It was mostly Washington, North Carolina. The same hospital where our first babies were born. That was quite an ordeal too, to have to go all the way over there to the hospital to have your baby.
I was wondering about that. You had twins, didn't you, the first time?
I did. we had to make the trip to through the doctor and then make the trip back to, we just more or less, we didn't see him like we do, you know, the doctors now. And I think I saw him about 6 months, and then he told us he wanted us to come to be there at the hospital, to be able to go to the hospital at least 2 weeks in advance. And
well, there was a hurricane coming, and we figured we better get over there before that hurricane got here, or we wouldn't get out of here. And
we went on
were
Monday.
there during the hurricane.
We went on Monday, and they were born on Wednesday.
Wow.
And
3 days.
we called down here, and everybody didn't have telephones. And Mr. Andrew Austin had a telephone. That's up there where the hotline is now.
Mhm.
And we called there and told Shank Austin, answered the telephone. We told him what it was, and they said he waited all the way down the highway to the road, waist deep of water to get to tell our parents that we had 2 boys, twin boys.
That's 1947. That's
And there weren't that many twins being born. It was
not that many babies, really.
well, it just thrilled him that we had 2 boys, twin boys.
And that wasn't the highway either. That was the dirt road.
Dirt road he walked down.
Wow. Did you know that you were having twins?
No.
You didn't know?
No.
Wow.
They didn't even know it until
I knew it.
they didn't know it all day. All day long they didn't know. That's how far advanced medicine has come. He told me he'd never made that mistake before, not with anyone else.
Not knowing about the twins?
The doctor said he hadn't, and he delivered a set of twins from here not too long before that.
He come out and told me, he said, it's 2 boys, twin boys. I said, well, I told you that.
Never had any problem.
She was laying down. You could feel them. One would kick on this side, one on that side. I figured no way in the world a baby could move around that much. But you could see them. See them when they pop up.
When they were about 2 years old, there was no doctor here. And one of them had gotten an eye infection, and we had to hold his hands to keep him from scratching at night. And it was terrible, and he just walked up the road for to go to the store, I guess, and someone else said there was a doctor over at Atlantic Hill, just on vacation. And he came to them, and he happened to have in his bag some ointment in a tube. And I told him I was using boric acid, and by the way, the boric acid, now I'll tell you, it's poison not to use it for anything, you know, like eye wash or anything, but that's what we had to use, and you're talking about wanting to know some of the things.
Sure, yes, absolutely.
And I just, then it had directions of how to mix it with water. You boil water first, you know, to sterilize it, and that's what I was using, and it would give him some relief. And the doctor told me, he said, he took his temperature, and he said, he's fine, he doesn't have temperature, but he said, what you were doing would have eventually cured it, but it would have taken longer. And he said that was good, that what I was doing. And that ointment cured it up really quick, and that was really something. I thought that doctor had to be at that time.
It's a blessing.
And I'm sure there's other people who had the same experience.
What other way did you use the boric acid?
I never used it for anything else. That was mainly what people would get it for. It would come in a small container. Just the pine.
For an eye wash?
Yeah, that was most. Well, I don't know if they used it for like you would do peroxide or not. I'm not sure. I did. That was all we used it for, just an eye wash. And I'm sure some of the eye washes now probably has something similar.
Sure, in their ingredients. Can you think of any other things that were used?
Say
Vicks and camphor and
castor oil.
Castor oil and the
They take
red.
castor oil and take an orange and
Well, that
put the
orange
juice,
come out later.
put
You
the
used to
juice.
take just plain castor oil right out of the bottle, and then somebody come up with the idea to mix it with a little bit of orange juice, and it improved it a whole lot.
And then
Castor oil's hard to take. It gives me chills think about it now.
after they,
But we know some people down here right now that still takes it.
Wow.
They get a cold, first thing they do, take a spoonful of castor oil.
And do you think it helps?
It does that.
doctors say
It'll
it's
clean
too,
you right out.
it's too harsh, but I don't think it is for a person that eats, that can eat. I don't think it's that harsh. It just does something to all that, mucus.
It just sticks to it,
And breaks it up.
it breaks it up.
I can't,
Break it up, it pulls it out of you.
Yeah.
They used, asphagnum. I know you've heard of that.
What's that?
Asphagnum, it's similar to a garlic.
I don't think I have heard of that.
Yeah, they use that.
Asphagnum?
Yeah,
Okay.
asphagnum, they called it, and, yeah, I do remember, tea. Sassafras,
Okay.
a branch,
I know about the
a branch
sassafras.
of wood. And my mother, where they got this, I really don't know, but I remember seeing the little branch, and she would scrape it off with a knife, just peel it like, and, whittle, I guess is the name. And put it and boil it, and then we'd drink that tea, break fever. It would break fever. And this is old fashioned, but we still do it, and we don't have fevers anymore, thank God. Too old for it, I guess, but what we would do when we had fevers, wrap up until you
Sweat a fever out of you.
Huh.
and then stay there. Don't get out and get chills, but stay in your bed. And nowadays they say that you're better off if they ice you down and just run around with no clothes on, bring your temperature down. But I guess it's different bacteria and things you're dealing with now. But that fever would break. It really would break. And of course, like I say, the tea. See, the tea would help it too. Sassafras too. I can remember that. And chicken grease, pork root.
And how was that taken?
By spoons. And how they preserved it, I do not know that. It was in a bottle. It was tried out in a bottle, kind of like you do butter. You know how butter is when it won't go back. It was heated, I suppose, and until it turned to liquid, and then was put in a bottle. And I guess when it got rank or something, they just dispose of it and just keep getting. But I was a croup child. I know. Every March, just about when the wind would blow like it does here, it would be so nice outside. I'd get out and play, and it would be croup for sure. And that's why my mother used that until they did come out with the like the Vicks and things like that. That helped. That would help. And they say don't ever put Vicks in your mouth, but we did.
I heard that from
Stop
someone
it.
else.
And it would work, and it still works.
No more than
It still works for a cough, and it's not poison. No.
It's like these cough tablets they got now.
They make, you don't have to keep this, but most of all these things that are done is to sell products. And that Vic Sav didn't make any claim on anything like that, but it didn't say don't do it either. And I think that must have some pine or some natural thing like mint and pine, and they didn't used to put that much of ingredients on things, I don't believe. It's all been forced into it now. But we find out our own way, I guess. If you had a bad cough, take a little bit of that and put it on your tongue, and it's the same thing that a cough drop does. I never took any mentholatum though, because that was harsh. I think that was too strong. We didn't do that. Do you know of anything else you've heard of?
I did hear about the Vicks. I heard about a cough elixir with a little bit of whiskey and honey and lemon. I heard about that being used from Lady Nadia.
Now, I know that my mother kept a flat bottle of whiskey, and it was kept in a safe place, and that was what it was for. It was medicinal purpose. We were not allowed to, you know, have it or anything like that, but we knew what it was for. And they had, of course, the older people had things to take things that children didn't need. I can't think right now some of the things that they used to mix that whiskey with, but they had preparations they'd use, like later on they came out what they call Narvine, and they had things. They actually probably had things that were almost like narcotic, I suppose, but they knew how to use it. They did. It wasn't anything that they took made a habit. Just got to go back to the other thing. I'm trying to think of some of that. But
I heard a woman told me about laudanum. Paregoric.
That was something you could get it at in a bottle, like a flavor bottle. And all they did with that was mix it in water, I suppose. I don't know. See, that wasn't anything for children. And now it might have been for babies. I've heard of that. Now, I never had it. And I never used it for babies, but I've heard that they used to give babies a tiny bit of it, you know, for pain, for teething, and like that. But it was addictive, I think. People had to have it. They would, if they got hooked on it, I guess is what they call it now. But I never remember anything like that. And there's something called niter. I've heard of that. But I don't know what that was for either, unless it was something for liniment. And there were liniments that could be purchased that were made. I believe that probably came from having to take care of horses and the animals that did the work. I believe that's where liniment really came from. They used it for horses a lot, and they find out, I guess they find out that veterinary medicine, what they call veterinary medicine now, is also good for humans.
Sure. Have you ever heard of laudanum?
Yeah, I've heard of laudanum, but my mother never had laudanum that I know of, and it was probably even older than what we were, that they used that. I've heard it in reading, I suppose, more than anything else. I don't think it was in common use here, is what I know.
What about the Yopon?
We didn't ever use Yopon here, but they did in Avon, village in Avon, and why, I don't know. There was Yopon here.
My father drank it. He liked it.
Did he?
Did he really?
It's strong. But Yopon tea, they liked it.
Did they drink it just for the sake of drinking it, or did they use it for medicinal purposes, do you think?
No, just liked it, I guess. Avon, I guess, had more Yopon bushes than we had.
Ruby Williams from Avon told me, and now she's 90, and she told me that the Yopon was actually produced in Frisco and then sold to the people in Avon. Could that have been maybe even just older?
It might have been.
Further back, that it was done in Frisco?
I don't know.
Because I've heard different versions of that.
They have a lot in Avon even now.
Well, we'd get mad with one of them up there. We'd always call them Kinnicator Yopon eaters.
I think it came more from people that
That's
maybe...
about the same thing as cussing them.
Right.
I think it came from the people that came in on the life-saving. A lot of it, that they brought people in the life-saving stations. I think they learned from other people that it could be done.
Okay.
I think that's where it came from. I don't think it actually originated with the people here. I think it might have been from another country. I know in Portsmouth, Portuguese sailors his mother told us about the Portuguese sailors that would be there. Now, whether they were shipwrecked or just put in there, because it was a harbor. It come into the inlet, Ocracoke Inlet, and came into Portsmouth Island. And it was Ocracoke Inlet and down further. What is that down there? It's four signs down that way, but I don't know just what. But that's what made it an island anyway, the next opening. Drum Inlet? Drum Inlet, okay. I don't know that much about that area. But she's told us that those Portuguese sailors would come to the door and want food, and or at least they were thinking at first it was food they wanted, but they would do like this, and they determined that what they wanted was what they dipped, the snuff. The people here didn't snuff it. That's where it got its name, I guess. And the people, you don't see that much anymore, but the old people did.
Chew tobacco?
Chew tobacco and put the snuff in their mouth and let it lay there. They called it a bad habit, but...
My mother had put a mini dip of it in her mouth.
They take a brush from
go out to like a yopon bush and pull a little piece off of it, and then she'd chew the end of it. Right down where, I'd call it the root or the branch where it grew into the bigger part. And she'd chew that up and make it like a brush out of it, almost like a paintbrush. She'd chew that in. That's what she dipped down in that stuff, sticking in her jaws.
Now, we had no idea of how far that came down, but it didn't go on in any of the children our age. We never saw any of our...
I tried it one time, like I choked to death really quick.
It's something we just didn't pick up and do. It was strong. I mean, but it was... I suppose it kept them calm and made life better for them, I guess, but it didn't pass down. But they didn't lose their teeth either.
My mother used it until she died.
You know, his mother had her teeth when she died. She was 86 years old.
Maybe they put more harmful chemicals in it now than they used to.
I think so.
Natural
because they had a lot more brands, and she wouldn't have but one brand. I remember that. We'd have to look.
She called it salt snuff.
Salt snuff, yeah. And she did not have any lung disease or anything from it, and it didn't have any effect on the teeth.
My father chewed tobacco, apple tobacco, that old plug tobacco.
You remember when they started rolling cigarettes? You never saw people smoke back then, did you?
Very little bit.
It was the chewing of the tobacco.
They rolled the cigarettes.
When did they start rolling cigarettes for smoking?
Ever since I can remember.
Okay. So they had both then?
Yeah.
That Prince Albert?
They used to
And
have
a tin, and a black
old
tin.
Bull Durham, they called it. Have a little bag. Stick down in your pocket. You bought your cigarette papers. You bought a pack of them. Prince Albert had a bunch of different tobaccos.
They rolled those cigarettes like that until the wartime.
Yeah, they rolled them for a long time.
Yeah, all this that happened out here in western North Carolina, all that factory and all those things were built just then.
Okay.
And they probably had it on a smaller scale, because I know you get Chesterfield. What was the one that Lucky Strike was so popular?
Chesterfield, Lucky Strike, Camels.
But then after the war, it just exploded, I guess. They just went with everything. It probably wasn't as harmful even then as it's gotten to be.
Sure.
They admitted that they put something in it to
They can add.
I think so.
They can add to it and build a nicotine up.
I think,
and
yes.
that makes it addicted. You're addicted to it.
Now, when we were growing up, girls didn't smoke. Not ever. If a girl was seen smoking, she was really
Norfolk,
punished.
Virginia had a law that women weren't allowed to smoke on the streets.
Wow.
And you never, in fact, they weren't even allowed to smoke in public. Even when I was growing up, and in bar rooms and stuff like that, the women went in the bathrooms to smoke.
it's something, I hadn't really been thinking about that, but there's something that girls just did not do. And once in a while you'd see a girl that would sort of break away from society, I guess, social graces, and decide she's just
But
not
they did wear lipstick. I'll never forget that one girl.
They always did
I
that.
just bought a new sport coat, and she got some of it smeared on the collar of my
Uh-oh.
man, I never forgot it.
We had some of the older ladies that were like movie stars. They looked so nice. I can remember. There was nice looking people maybe. I lived to see some of them pass away.
Yeah,
And
Avon
I
used
to
to
admire
be
them.
known for the pretty girls.
Ah.
They had some pretty girls you can find any place.
They,
When we were growing up, all us boys, we'd head up that way, up the beach. We'd walk.
You walked from
Avon,
here to
yeah.
Avon? Wow.
I think it's a little bit more than this place.
But we'd walk all the way up the beach.
They were fun too, weren't
They had Coast Guard stations up and down the beach. And we got thirsty, they had big water tanks. We stopped to get our water. If we were hungry, we went in, they'd give us a bowl of beans and some biscuits.
Our good times were just going no further away than Ocracoke.
Once in a while, we'd steal one of their chickens, take them somewhere to roast it. But
How long did it take you on foot from here to Avon?
I don't know if we ever really timed it.
Was it a whole day or a few hours or 2 days?
We'd do it in probably half a day.
They go to the beach.
Okay.
We'd mess around, play around,
To
run,
walk the beach is a lot
push each other
easier.
down, and just worked our way on that beach.
Sure.
When I was even in high school, that would be our Sunday pastime. We'd walk out to the beach, walk up the beach, come out the road, walk back down, come home. That would be what we did for pleasure, just to walk on the
They
beach.
had wild animals on the beach. People always let their animals run, horses, cows, sheep. They let them out on the beaches.
There were no
Chase
guns.
them, you could chase them if you wanted
There
to.
were no guns.
And if you could catch one of them, get on him, ride him up. But that's just something to do.
Sure.
I've walked from here to Nag's Head,
Really?
walked all the way up the beach.
The low water, when you get low water, you walk very easily.
But you didn't pay no attention to it. You got tired, you just sat down, which back then we never even got tired.
Right.
Didn't know what it was.
It's a shame, really. We've lived here now the past 40 years. And I can
one
kite very easily.
between here and Frisco had an old bull out on the beach. They called him Old Albert. And that sucker would chase you. And we had to watch where him was going. And we kept watch on Old Albert. When you see him plow the ground a little bit with his front feet, you better get out of the way. He was coming.
They had names for the animals. Different ones.
Horses, wild horses. I remember we used to run them out in the ocean. Get a brush or something, run them out in the ocean. When they get out in the ocean, we swim out and climb on their backs. You can stay on them until they hit dry ground, then they throw you. But that's the only way you get on them.
Now, were they the actual wild horses like they still have over on Ocracoke? Were they common
belong
here?
to people.
Oh, they belong
People
to
have
people,
'em.
okay.
My father, they branded them every year,
Mm-hmm.
and I've still got the branding on it.
Ah.
I've still got my father's branding on it. He could brand them every spring of the year.
They would brand the horses that belong to them, of course, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
They let them go. They didn't.
They just let them run.
And what was the usefulness of the horses? If they were just essentially wild, did they use them for work or anything, or?
Yeah, see, before they got the automobiles, they had these carts,
Sure.
and they'd break them. my brother, oldest brother, I've seen him many a time get on them. And he'd get on them, break them. He'd tie sandbags on them, try to break them that way, and he'd get on them. But he'd break them, or they could put them to a cart. But they use those carts for everything.
And they just let them roam when did they feed them daily, or did they just let them go to eat the
grass, whatever it was that
Sure.
day. You didn't have to feed them. Now in the,
If you had one that you were using, I suppose.
every year they had these dipping vats that they'd run them through to kill the ticks and things like that on them. They used to run them through that, but every year they grind them up, the cattle, grind them up, run them through the
I don't
vats.
remember being any sheep here. Don't remember any sheep.
Yeah, they were.
I say I don't remember.
Frisco had some sheep?
Yeah, well, they did everywhere. They had them. They had more, seemed like there's more up around Frisco than anywhere else.
Okay.
Sammy Rawson, he chased a bunch of us with a stick one time, but we were messing with some of his sheep, riding them. He caught us.
Well, didn't they have...
He went at us with a club.
They never
Got out
had
of the
as
way.
many storms back then. The kind that devastate, because we were telling you about the trees that
Yes.
used to be here. And I know down well, the same for
Down by the ferry
the
dock,
last time
on the
before
shore
you...
side by the ferry dock, that used to be a lot of trees, and a lot of that property's been washed away. It's out in the sand now, but there used to be trees a long ways out there, big trees. We used to hang ropes in them, and we'd play tars and we'd swing from one tree to the other. And,
Sure.
you know, every Sunday evening that was something to do, get in there and play in the trees. A lot of times we're going probably a quarter of a mile just in trees,
Wow.
going through the tops of it. And my mother, I've heard her say that the only place you could even sometimes get in the sun was back all the way to the beach. And
It's pine
the
trees
trees grew
mostly.
clear out to down to
And
the beach.
oaks and yopon, but
And
mostly
right now, they'll
pine.
still dig up tree roots sometime on the beach.
That's when the animals were more here, is when it was places for the animals to be.
Yes.
They couldn't survive here in all the heat.
In our time,
Sure.
up the road past the red and white one up that way, it was all covered in trees, heavy trees all up that way.
But it also didn't used to be as hot as it is now. They're right about all that they're saying, you know, about the heat, because if you've been here very long, you can even see the difference, I'm sure. That may be what causes the storms to be so violent.
The changing weather patterns.
Could be, because even in, 1968, on through till 1970, the late 70s, we didn't even need air conditioning.
I've read
We
where,
could manage with open windows, but I reckon some people still can, but I don't believe that I could.
I've read where they said cities, what makes cities so hot is when they're clearing out all the trees for all these huge parking lots and putting asphalt concrete down, and it's drawing more sun.
And
making
less
everything
rain.
hotter. They're just cutting the trees out and destroying them.
I know one reason why you can't stand to be in a house that's open is the dirt, the pollution. It's not, you know, used to, we had clean air. You know, people will tell you, oh, you have it great there because you have all the fresh air. And I said, you should see it sometimes, what we have. You know, like all the rivers run to the ocean. The air comes over this way too, it's clouds, because you can see it in the early morning sometimes. You can see the fog light. And the houses get dirty inside, needing these pills.
Someone had told, actually, I think Margaret Willis' sister, she may even be a relative of yours. I met her at family gathering. Delmer, their son, had married Valerie, and I know Valerie. Anyway, she was telling me that there's a lot of dust here.
Yeah, it didn't used to be.
It didn't used to be like that?
No. My mother was a really good housekeeper, and she had her days for cleaning in the bedroom. And she would just sweep out what had come from the bedding. That would be what it was, and it was just white. You
We
know.
had more dust
Sure.
in
You could
here.
pick it up. Try picking this dust up. It's dirt.
Right.
When you sweep up anything that gets in your house with an open window, of course, like I say, I don't open windows, and I don't have it as bad, but we get some carpet. And you can tell, you'll see it if you look closely, it's mostly fiber. But you could pick that up just like the cotton that was coming from the bedding, and she didn't have to worry too much about dust and furniture. It just, they didn't have overstuffed furniture that much, like I told you. And they didn't have carpeting. They would have scatter carpeting, but that could be taken out and shook on a good day.
So there's definitely more dust here.
Well, yeah,
than
I think
used to
since
be.
the highways
Okay.
I think that made it worse. I think it made the dirt black.
Okay.
The cars
Our
running
dirt
off into
started
the
here
dirt.
back in the early 60s when they started bringing drag lines in, digging ditches
Mud.
in the field
Mud.
property. That's when it started. Our sand turned to dirt.
All we ever used for field was a beach sand.
Yeah, we used to use
And
beach
it was
sand for
clean.
filling.
And I know when our boys were 2 years old when we left, weren't they?
Yeah.
But as children, young children, to get out and play, they didn't need a bath either.
Lord, we kicked our shoes off
They
in the
could run
spring of the year.
barefoot and never get soiled.
We'd kick our shoes off in the spring of the year and didn't even put them on until next fall. It got so cold.
You
we
were
had to
made to
put 'em on.
wash out, but it wasn't like it is
Your feet
now.
never got that cold. I mean, never got that dirty.
Wow.
And your feet stayed clean.
It is very dusty here, and I think it comes with clouds.
Once in a while, my mama would tell me, she said, "You wash your feet?"
It
I'd
was
have
like
to
the
go out.
sand, though. You just didn't want
We
sand
had
in
a-
the house.
Big tanks of water. And I go out and turn the spigot on, stick my foot under it, rinse them off a little bit, going in the house.
But that got a lot of dirt in. I'm sure of that with the asphalt.
Another thing I wanted to ask you folks about, say, I wanted you to tell me a little bit more about the fishing industry here as it was coming up, and the fish houses that were in the village here that you remember from when you were young.
When we were growing up, the fish houses was out into the sound.
They had
The harbor that they've got down here now is, you can get small boats in it. And they kept their boats, bigger boats, tied up, and they kept them anchored out into the sound. And then they use their small shove skiffs to go out to the boat. And they had their fish houses out at the sound. And that's where they bring their fish in. And we use block ice to ice the fish down.
That was it. They served three purposes, didn't they, at least?
Yeah, the boats would come in and they'd bring you ice. They'd bring ice and you'd store it in your little ice house, which that was like a double wall filled with sawdust.
Okay.
They'd pack sawdust in it to insulate the walls, and which it kept the ice good. They'd wrap it up and keep it. And they had hand shavers to shave it up to put on the fish. And they had mostly sailboats would come in. The big start with, they had big sailboats would come in, and then they started coming out with boats operated by gasoline motors.
Now, when you say out in the sound, were they buildings on stilts in the sound?
They put them on pilings, just like you see some of these
And,
fishing
and
piers
could
now.
actually, when they got automobiles, the automobile could even run on
Yeah,
those.
they used,
roads, we
wow.
call them.
my uncle was the first one to build a pier out of his fish house that you could drive on.
Hmm.
And my cousin, Marlin Willis, he run off of it. He ran off of the bridge.
Oh, goodness. Was he
The
hurt?
steering on some of the old Model A's wasn't as good as they are now. You had what we call a lot of loose motion in them. You had to turn your wheel about halfway around before it take a hold.
Sure.
And the bridges was just narrow enough, just wide enough to go down in, that's all.
Mhm.
Most of them just had little footbridges out to their,
So they weren't out very far then?
no, probably 200 or 300 yards.
Okay. And how large were they as building structures?
Wasn't most over probably 20 by 20, something like that.
Mhm.
Just big enough.
The freight boats would put off freight
decking was,
merchandise for the stores, and then they would pick up fish in the boxes and take them to market. And that went on for a long time.
yeah, they bring freight in, and they'd load it on horse and carts and take it to the stores, deliver it to the stores. And I think up here the Burris's Red and White, they've still got a lot of pictures with delivering freight to the old store, because that's about the only store down here now is left that's still operating.
The name.
And they started that back in the 1800s.
We remember Mr. John Makins. He had a dock. Mr. Rance Odin was an oil supplier. And the caskets. He used to the caskets.
Yeah, he had
A casket house, and
He
we
sold
played walk by
caskets.
it.
and we always called it the casket house. And there was a crowd of us one time on a Halloween night. I don't know, everybody saw that casket, somebody walking down the highway, down the road with it, dirt road with it. I reckon somebody went in there and stole one. And we saw that, and I know I made my brother walk all the way around the beach with me, and we wasn't too far from our house, but I wouldn't pass that place where that casket, we saw that casket, and made him walk all the way around the village to get me home. Of course, they were willing to do it, because they didn't want to go that way. We just thought that old casket house was haunted.
And he sold gasoline too.
Yeah.
He had a gasoline pump.
He sold Gulf gas.
And then the next one up that I remember was Mr. Roscoe.
Yeah.
He had a nice outdoor deal.
Mr. Roscoe had
one. Probably one of the
But he
biggest
built
ones
his
ever
in
built.
later years. He didn't
Yeah,
have-
I know it was later.
Yeah.
It was one of the last, I guess.
Yeah.
So did they put the fish houses in the sound itself to be more accessible to boats, I guess?
That's
Is
what
that
it's for.
okay?
Those
That's what
big
it's
freight
for.
boats coming in, there was just
Sure.
wasn't enough water into the harbors. The harbor was just deep enough for small chef skids.
Sure.
And the channels had been,
Didn't have outboards.
the channels that they
Yeah,
navigate
sailboats,
now,
chef skids.
the channels that they navigate now have been dug.
Oh, okay.
And like, not all
When they
of them
built,
reeds.
we call it the ice plant. When they built that, Tom Eaton from Newbern came over, and he was going to make ice, and they built that ice plant there. That's why we call it the ice plant. It's then the Burris Oil Company had a place there too, right on the water. But the old ice plant, after they was making ice for the fishermen, they dredged the channel out where the boats could come into the harbor, and then they did away with the old fish houses out on the.
Around what time was that?
It was in the 30s.
It was in the 30s, yeah, early 30s. And they changed the.
They generated electricity too from
Yeah,
the same building.
then they found out the old Buckeye diesels would put out enough electric, so they started running electricity to people's houses.
Oh, wow.
And,
From the ice-making machine.
yeah.
I have, one of my colleagues had sent me some notes. She was wondering about, she'd heard something about a Fraser Peel, who had a one-man utility company for power and ice.
Yeah,
That was what you're talking about?
he went in business with Tom Eaton.
He had the land,
Tom
he had the
Eaton.
property.
Eaton.
E-A-T-O-N.
He had the property, and that's how he got in with them.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, his house was right there too.
Hadn't been too long ago, moved that house. It's
Yeah.
there where it's right there.
Right next to Harbor Motel.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a parking area now.
Yeah. Right across from Midgett Brothers.
Mm.
Midgett Brothers.
No, well, they do have that yeah, there are.
It used to be fishing stuff. They bought, my uncle had that property there, and they bought the property from him, built that place, fishing stuff it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And Fraser Field lived right across the street from it.
Okay.
They also, on that strip there where now they build up, on the other side of the harbor that is on the sand, they've built homes there, and the old people used to have net camps
Yeah.
and tar pots where they'd tar their pine fishing net.
Uh-huh.
They had the tar pots and their fish camps there. And what he's saying is they've dug away from what used to be there and made the harbor that you see.
Oh, so that's what used to be there, were fishing
It was
camps?
just a,
Net camps?
yeah, it was just a
Right.
little
It used to be
splash
just
of water.
bottom of water, just deep enough
Small
to
boats
shove
could go
a
in
small
there.
flat bottom boat in.
Uh-huh.
And when they built the ice plant, they dredged all that out for bigger boats to come in, open the harbor up.
Uh-huh.
And then years later, they just began to dig it out with drag lines in.
And
make
build
it
a breakwater.
bigger.
Build a breakwater there.
And they put the Corps engineers come in and build what we call a breakwater. They put the rocks and everything like that for opening.
It was amazing to see the shells that came from.
But when
What
they were
they
digging, dredging that out where the ice plant was, there were some turtles. I guess they snapping turtles, what we call. They were some of the biggest I've ever seen in my life. They were, looked like they're 4 or 5 feet long.
Wow, 4 or 5 feet long, that's amazing.
And we used to swim in those creeks.
In mud.
They mud down, and I don't know how in the world we swum, played in there, never did get bit in one of them.
Huh.
But I don't ever remember any kids being lost.
Wow.
They dredged up shells that were perfect and shiny. Pretty shells, you know, that came up from the earth beneath.
Wow.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Sure. Were they shells that you don't see, or that you didn't see at that time, current shells?
You don't see them now.
Uh-huh.
You don't see them now.
What kind of shells? Do you know what kind of species they were?
No. It would have been like clams, I suppose.
Okay.
And they have what they...
You can go out here right now, and like
Little
if you're going to bury a
little
deep,
clumps, not big ones, little ones.
if you're going to bury a deep well, wash your pipes down.
Mm-hmm.
When that water's coming up out of the ground, it'll bring shells up
Wow.
out of the ground.
Hmm.
And you wonder sometime how they got there, this far inland from the water.
Uh-huh.
But there's just as many shells under this ground out here as there are
Sure.
on the beach.
And yet we seem lower than we've ever been in our time.
But there are all kinds of shells.
Wow.
It's a high possibility that a long time ago it was all water.
Sure, sure.
That's what probably is the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
Probably was a lot more water than there was earth.
Could you tell me some more about the net camps that the older folks had with they had camps set up where they made the net?
Yeah, well, no, they didn't make the net. They
Did that mostly, huh?
they mended in the cold weather. In the winter, they would mend inside and store them, use it for storage.
The houses, most of the houses are built with long halls. When you come in the front door, you had a long hallway. Went through the house, mostly all the way back to the kitchen, which in your bedrooms and living rooms, everything was branched off of that hallway.
Made it
About every
cooler.
home was built that way.
Made it cooler.
And they use that for cooler, and they also use it to mend their nets and make their nets in too.
In the hallway.
So they could stretch it down that hallway. Starting the front door all the way to the back.
They did most of their trading from faraway places too.
Yeah.
Bring in the net and the
My father used to ship
road.
fish to Philadelphia. And that's where the freight boats would pick up the fish. And they put them on the freight boats after they boxed up and iced up. And they'd take them over mainland, Elizabeth City, Little Washington, and that's where they were shipped out on that north.
Okay.
And there were a few people around here that did mend it. I mean, tying, they called it, tying net or making net. But the twine had to be purchased from someplace, and
Sure.
they did a lot of their purchasing. I know you're talking about your father. I remember my father always had that Calvert Fulton Fish Company in New York. That was in New York City, and they supplied fish markets far away, considering you know
Sure.
how you didn't have transportation out of here except by boat. But Elizabeth City is what most of those boats. Some of them went to Washington, but most of them went to Elizabeth City. It must have really been a hub
Globe Fish Company in Elizabeth City used to,
for
a lot of people
points
used to
all
send
over.
them there. But you could make a trip up there in a day,
Sure.
back and forth in the boat. It almost takes you that night drive.
I told you
Sure.
before about the people that I knew that made those nets.
Yes, I had their name written down somewhere here.
They did. They made a
My
living.
mother used to make them.
They used a gauge, what we called a gauge, but it was a piece of, it was made
Depending on
smooth.
how big a net they want them is that gauge. They'd make them any size they wanted them. And they'd make it out of hardwood, something that wouldn't wear out.
Sure.
And you put that on there and tie
You
your
put that net on a spool,
each
put it
one
on
would
a,
be a perfect
kind
size.
of like you do, you crochet or your knitting yarn to get it, you know, the skein. It would come in skeins, mostly. And they'd put that around a hub like, and I can do it and pull that line off, and you make a knot or a hitch like, and then you start off with your gauge, you wrap around and then tie a knot. You wrap around and tie a knot. Well, like he said, however many, the mesh was measured with that gauge that was made from the wood, however wide it would be.
Depending on how deep they wanted it, they'd count how many times they had made that lot on that one piece. They were usually about 3-4 inches long, that gauge. And when they get that so many on it, like 30, 40, 50, depending on how deep they wanted the net, and then they take it off and start over again.
You couldn't get that many on most that I saw, but anyway, when they filled that, they would just pull it off, put it to the side. And then when they got counted it, how many marches they had, they would start over again through the first one and do the same thing. It's easy.
The same
Sure.
thing, right?
Really
over and over.
easy. But it looked me like it would be really hard on the nerves. Monotonous, but they did.
Sometime I remember my mother used to, I guess she counted them in her mind, how many
Yeah.
to take on
Yeah,
it.
you
And
could,
every
you
once
could
in a
get it
while
around.
she might forget and she'd recount them to make sure.
And then the road, see, this would be just nothing but a long, use them for decoration, just a long skein of net that's got the
Then they put
meshes.
the rope on them. They'd string the ropes down that hall. Then they'd come in with a
Mark
whole
it.
line in the nets. They
mark
had
it.
certain ways and certain distance they wanted to put it. it depended on how you wanted the net to hang down. And if you wanted it hang to where you wanted to hang where your marsh would sort of be square when it hung down, and you had a distance, and they marked it and gauged it. They marked their line where they could tie it so that net would hang right.
And then it would be
had
made with,
floats.
yeah.
They knew how many, they put their lead on, they knew how many leads to put on. It would sink it. Some they wanted to sink all the way down, some they wanted to float. Well, if they wanted it to sink, they put more lead on it than they had floats.
Corks, we call
And
them.
we call them corks.
They're absolutely cork.
And that way it would go to the bottom. If you wanted it to float, they'd put less lead where your lead would stay up top of it, be up top of the water, but your lead would pull it down straight, and it would hang in the water straight. Each marsh was square when it was hanging. And
Then later on, they had them.
those are smart people figure all that
Later
out.
on, they had them
They knew
professionally
what they were
made,
doing.
you know, and
Now they got machines that makes all that mess. And they got monofilament line, which is not repairable. It's
throw
hard
it away.
it's hard to mend. They just use it and throw it away.
But on days when they couldn't fish, the fishermen from these camps would mend their nets. And they do it the same way. They know how to do it, to tie on to the right place, to make those loops and bring it in to where it is patched, and you can't hardly tell where it began, where it
You
ended.
cut your net out, you start with a
Crafty.
point and end with a point.
Very crafty. Yeah, they would cut the bad, weak part out, like he's talking about. It's craft.
Yeah.
You just didn't do it without knowing what you were doing. I would cut a whole net up, I'm sure. If I had to do it.
Well, when you first start, you do.
Yeah, you have to learn it. It's
I
for
remember one
sure.
time I mended one, my brother, he asked me if I was going to cut the whole net to pieces. And then he decided to show me what to do. They let you sort of figure it out for yourself. If you can't, they'll help you. But they wouldn't tell you nothing. They just say, give you a needle, say, hey, mend that hole there, fix that hole.
Some people were better fishermen than others.
They expected you to know it for some reason.
It was a livelihood, is what
But
it
if
was.
you
It
get a
wasn't-
hole
it
big
wasn't
enough, then they
sport.
come over and stop you and tell you to mend it. And I'd always, if I'd find a hole that I didn't think I could do, I just let it go, let somebody else work it.
And you want to know how people caught their ocean fish, like the channel bass and all that they fish so hard for? Well, with a skein of rope in this hand,
We take
throw
lines
it out.
down where your sinker, your weight was at.
They didn't have a rod.
We'd have a little stick. We'd have a little stick about so long, and you catch it right between your fingers. And we'd use that to throw, just throw it, and you had that string coiled around your hand. And when you threw that thing, it just peeled off your hand.
I'm sure it was
You
fun,
do
but
it
it was
out, you
also
pull a
done for
fish.
food.
Yeah.
You didn't stand there and pull him in, hand pull him in. You just grabbed it and run across the beach with it.
Did you use any bait on the line?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they had bait.
And
They
when
knew
you,
what to use, too.
When you got him up on the beach on dry ground, you went back there and got him.
Sometimes you could cut a fish out and use it for bait and catch the same kind of fish with it.
Really?
I was never a fisherman.
Now, did they dip the nets in tar? Is that what they
Yeah,
did?
that was another thing.
That was what they call pie-dip.
They made different kinds of nets.
Okay.
And when I was pie-dipping, we had just pure old coal tar. And my father and brother would pick the hottest days in the summer. That's when they do their tarring. And it just, I guess it just easier. That old tar, you had a great big old pot. And I guess the hotter it was, the less heat it took to melt
Real
that
fire,
stuff.
sure.
Because it had to be melted real soft. And if you had a net that's already been tarred, you had that old tar still on it. And on a place that would dry out.
Mhm.
And it weren't easy work.
They had what they call net spreads.
And now they use copper paint, the same thing they use on boats,
Antifouling.
antifouling paint,
Hmm.
which is light. That's no heavier than the net itself.
Mhm.
They have it nice now, the way
It's,
they use winches and...
Of course, they got hoists too now. They can use drop it down there and pull it out.
Mhm.
They got hoist run by motors that does it.
Some of the wealthiest people on
They
this
took all
island
the
were
work out of it.
fishermen.
Really?
They
were.
took the work out of the fishing.
They did. They made good living though. Those people that kind of fish.
We used to go out in the ocean, piece of coal. I've seen that salt water wash up on a boat on the sides of it, just freeze.
Wow.
And we'd run that net overboard, and you had to pull it in by hand. And you pull it in, you pick the fish out of it, and just keep pulling it in till you got all the fish out of it. And we've many a time I've stuck my hand back in the water or in the bucket of water just to warm them, throw them out. But we'd, if we get in trout, start catching trout, we had little kerosene stoves. And we used to dip a bucket of water, just dip a bucket of water out of the ocean and put it on that stove. When that old salt water started boiling, you see the foam all coming out of it. You pick a trout out of a net and throw him in that bucket of water and cook him. By the time you got your net in, your fish was cooked.
Wow.
Guts, feathers, and all. And all we do, we'd set up on the cabin and just open that fish up, take the inside, rush it one side, and just eat him right on down to the scales.
Wow. Was
But
it good?
It was good eating.
Yeah, sounds good actually.
I never cleaned a fish until with him and working down there. I found out I could do it. I never cleaned a fish.
She always says she couldn't.
I never tried.
Right.
But people did. The women did clean fish. It's just my father always did the dressing
Sure.
fish. I never.
But people had plenty of fish to eat. They had plenty of wildfowl, ducks and geese. And people used to hunt them to eat. They get what they wanted to eat.
Mhm.
And then it got to where they started using it for sport. Just killing them, letting them float off. And that's why I guess the government stepped in. And,
Not the local
started
people
controlling it.
though.
But the
It was
local
just people coming for sport.
They didn't kill them for
Yeah.
sport. They killed one. If you didn't eat it, somebody else would.
Yeah.
Sure.
And same way with fish.
But a lot of people made their living at it.
You
They
didn't.
kill them and sell them to people that
Ah.
didn't hunt.
Mhm.
And they made their living that way.
People in Frisco were good hunters. They were really good
They,
hunting people.
A lot of them, that's all they had to do is hunt. They made their living that way.
Wow.
And I'm sure when they hired out, they saw that those fowl were taken care of. Like you said,
Oh, yeah.
they would give them to people that they knew needed something to eat. They didn't waste them.
Just like you fish, you didn't go out here and just fish for the fun of it and throw them back overboard or
Sure.
something like that.
See, people here had been hurt by laws that had to be made for other people.
Right.
I don't think those laws were made for these people here. Because
Mhm.
I've never known of anyone here using firearms for hunting or
Mhm.
fishing for something that they couldn't use. I've never
Sure.
known it. And I don't think they do now. And if they took anyone out fishing, those fish are used, aren't they?
But there's people now that they'll go out here hunting, they'll just shoot and let it go. They kill
You know
it, they go
something
in,
we
pick it off. They
noticed?
don't pick it
Something
up.
we noticed when they first started fishing a lot, down here, people coming in and hiring people to take them fishing. They gave their fish to the charter boats to distribute any way they wanted to. And then they got to getting them and taking them away with them. They do now. They take them away.
But at first it was just for sport. They'd actually give the fish
Yeah.
away.
Yeah, they
Just
did.
sport.
But it's gotten to be where people, I think, really like to eat the fish.
Mhm.
And they'll get them prepared and frozen and take them with them.
Mhm.
And that's changed a lot. And there are people that live here, I'm sure, that don't get fish. Older people, I don't think they get them that much. Do you? People's got so they give you fish. The boys around here that get something they know he likes, they'll bring them to him. Of course, he dresses them. They don't fix them before they bring them. And they gave you some fowl the other day. First wildfowl you've had in a long time.
Yeah.
Wow. Do they ever hunt deer here?
Yeah. The deer down here is small, because there's not enough feed to really feed them. And our deer is real small, but my daughter run in one between here and Frisco. And the boy that took it home, he said he was real fat, but he was little. He wasn't, I'd say, about half grown, something like that. Now up in the mountain areas, they get real big.
Sure, yeah.
And, but here they don't. They much bigger than an oversized dog, big dog. But they're still good eating. And they hunt with shotguns here. They don't use rifles, because rifles travels too far. And in those woods, you never know how many people you're going to kill.
Right.
Using a rifle, but a shotgun only travels so far.
Sure.
That bad hurricane took away a lot of the wooded area in the lower end of Frisco up there.
But up where my daughter lives, there's
some
two
deer
deer up there. Plays around right up there. And,
I've seen a couple in my backyard in Frisco a few
they'll
times.
put feed out for them. But the berries and things like that they used to eat, some of that building going on now, people are cleaning the woods out.
Sure.
But they still head for the hunting season. They'll head for the Park Service ground out on the beach.
What else do you think?
They know when hunting season comes. During dove season, we get a lot of doves out here in the yard. I guess we don't shoot them.
They're more this year, less.
Yeah.
They must
They're
not
less this
had
year.
many being killed during the dove season. Because they usually disappear after the September, isn't it, when it opens?
Now, did the people gather the berries and things that were growing here to eat a lot?
No.
Blackberries.
The blackberries.
We used to walk, there used to be a lot of them up Frisco, right on the edge of the woods. And we used to walk all the way up Frisco to pick blackberries. And with grapes, a lot of wild grapes up there. We could get grapes.
Yeah,
and
we sure did. We did that
make
when we
jelly,
first
grape
married.
jelly, and blackberry jelly. And
Figs. Figs used to grow well, but they...
2 or 3 years ago, we had a place right out here that I don't know what happened, half as big as this room, just nothing but blackberries.
And that last tide that
And then-
came did away with
And
it.
that last tide just killed them out.
Takes a while for them to really
Sure.
set in like that.
I used to go out there and pick them,
Yeah,
pick a big bowl
I
full,
made
and
cobbler for they all
make
like
some
it.
blackberry cobbler.
It makes a good cobbler. Makes good jelly too. I didn't make any jelly.
It was hard on people here during the Depression, but I think the people here made out better than they did in the cities.
We did
always had
okay
plenty to
there,
eat.
and just before we left here, it wasn't money to be made, but
Yeah.
but we had a garden, and we had chickens, and I canned.
You
Can
see,
you
you have your
They
garden,
had a
you didn't have the disease, the bugs and stuff in the garden
No.
like you got now.
Never knew what it was
Now
to
you-
use anything for.
can't-
Really?
You can't even put a collard grate out unless you keep it sprayed to keep the bugs on there.
And we canned tanner bass, or drum, we call it. I canned that too. We
And
had
fish?
Yeah, we
Oh,
canned
wow,
that.
yeah. It's good. They had a fish plant up in one shoes canning that channel bass. And I don't know why they quit, because it was selling really
The
well.
laws got on.
I guess so.
Could you tell me some more about the porpoise factory? You had started telling me
We
something
never
about that.
found out any more about it. Just he
It
can
was
tell you where it was.
phasing out when we were growing up. remember people there, but, and I remember people walking, over there where it was at, and I know where it's at, but as far as going there, watching them and anything like that, I never
Most
did.
of it's probably in the zone, on the other side of the creek that goes up there. We used to call it the creek, but, it was right up there where Miss Dale and Mr. Rance lived, and I know he worked in a fortress factory because I don't remember him that much. I just remember hearing about him, that he was always oily. Said he always had oil on his clothes.
So
That's what they did it for.
That's what I was going to ask. Was it for the oil?
It was for the oil. It was for the oil.
Last part of the Depression, I went in what they call the CC camps. That's Civilian Conservation Corps. I went to them. I was 13-year-old, supposed to be at 18. But the man that signed me up, Mr. Ike Davis of Mattio, he said, you're big enough to be 18. And that was kind of funny to me. I still remember it. There I was, 13-year-old, standing around with about 25 or 30 other people, and they were all older. They were in their 20s and 25s, and me there, just a young boy standing among a bunch of naked men. I never forgot that.
Back then, you were taller
Yeah, I was
than
tall.
the usual.
Yeah.
But now the kids are tall.
But
They're really tall.
I was around 6 foot tall
In
back
school, he was head and shoulders above all the children. But now they're growing tall all the time, aren't they? The boys and girls around here. I know they are. They're much larger than the children I grew up with.
First time I lived in Hatteras, we took off like that in the CC camps and shipped to California. And got out to California working in a place called Tula Lake. Some of the hardest snow I ever seen in my life was, man, it snowed.
Was that when you were 13?
Yeah.
Wow. And your family let you go, or you just took off?
No, they let him go.
They let me go.
They
It
got
was
benefit from it.
Roosevelt started
That's what
it.
it was all
You made
for.
you made $30 a month. That's for a month,
That was good money, though.
and it was good money. And they give us 10 and sent 20 home. And I was in there. Well, I stayed in there until I got a little homesick. And I got my mother to write him a letter telling him that she needed me home. And by the time I got back home, I wanted to go again, so I took off again. And 3 times I went in. I got 3 discharges from them.
And you took diesel training
Yeah,
in one of those
they
camps.
trained me. I took diesel engine courses. That's for
Yeah,
the only
something.
diesel engines they had was in trains. They just began to put them in trains. And I took blueprinting, like construction engineering, and I just spent most of my time in schools.
Wow.
You helped there in
We built
Kings
a lot
Canyon,
yeah,
Canyon,
we
when
built
we
a
went
lot
back and
of,
visited. You helped build some of those,
we built a lot of
national parks.
these national parks now. All the national parks are built by the CC boys.
You know, I think they should do that again.
Yeah.
I think they
And
should
Sure.
do it again to
she
help
kept
children.
young boys and give them a job, and we were
And
under the
they
Army.
looked that for.
Like our officer in the camp was an Army officer. He was a lieutenant, and everybody else was civilians. But you done what he said.
Sure.
It's good training.
And,
Good training gets them off. It would get them off the
Took
street.
you to schools. I took leather craft. And, I hadn't forgot any of it.
It made you a better person, I'm sure.
I don't know of anything I can't do. At least try.
And
Sure.
then you have, I have your Siemens papers and things with your picture on it too, and you're really young then.
Yeah.
And so when you went in the Army, you had some pretty good training to prepare you for what you had to face in the Army.
Yeah, I went in the Army as a corporal. because they looked back in my
Oh, wow.
records, and they knew I'd been in the CC camps, and of course they trained you too. They you had to do your marching and things like that. They give you training a little bit, not a whole lot, but I mean you had to do a certain amount of it. And when I went in the Army, I guess they went by that, because I went in as a corporal. Long before they had me out drilling other people and stuff like that.
That training would help some of the young people now, though, that just...
It took a lot of them off the streets.
Sure, yeah.
And there's a lot of work. We used to work up in Kings Canyon and Sequoia Park and places like that out in California. We'd go in and clear the woods and make fire trails, because they're still having a lot of fires there way back then, where lightning hit those big trees. But we'd have fire trails, and there weren't that much danger. And we took a vacation out there several years ago, and I told her all those trails are all full of trash and broken off limbs. It's just
not being taken care of.
It's just a hazard waiting for a fire to start.
The
and
trees,
that's what causes so
need
many
to
fires out there. They're not taking care of the property. And we had all of that property all cleaned out under those trees, and we'd clean them up, make fire trails with bulldozers. We'd clean them, make big wide trails through there. If they had a fire, they'd get to that fire trail, and you could control it.
It would stop a lot of welfare too.
Yeah.
If they would do
They spend enough on welfare to horrid kids.
A lot of people are on welfare that don't want to be on welfare. They just don't have any other.
I quit school and went in, and of course they put you right in school in that. I didn't graduate, didn't go to college, but I was going to go to college after I got out of the Army, but didn't make it.
That's fine. You had a fine life.
Was
Didn't need it.
Yeah, that's right. It was different. A lot different.
Of course, we had twin boys.
I believe in education, but I really think that I just wish that they would do something about it and give these young people.
They said she could work in the kitchen,
Really?
pay for her room and board, and they said they'd give us a place to stay where the babies, the twins, could stay.
Of course, they were drumming up money back then, you know.
Yeah.
I think I still got all them papers.
I know. There's somewhere. I kept those about your CC camp thing, though, and your Siemens papers and things like that. It's
a lot of things the government could do now besides waste money if they do it and it help people.
Life is better in some ways, maybe easier on the people that are disabled, but for the people that are healthy and strong, they just need a better opportunity, I think, instead of thinking that they can be a professor or be a professional. Well, you know what I mean. There are plenty of jobs that people can hold their head up high doing.
Everybody can't be a brain surgeon.
Right.
But
They got to have somebody to roll the stretchers in.
They need some disciplinary action before they take these jobs that don't amount to much. I mean, they get in a job that doesn't pay very well, and they just go from one thing to another and never really get a skill. But if they would take the younger people that are not going to have an opportunity to go to a technical school or to a liberal arts college or any school of engineering or something, take them and give them an opportunity to find out what they're able to do, and they might do better than just go on welfare. There's a lot of people on welfare that don't want to be. I believe that. I mean, I don't think there's too much of a problem with anything like that here. most everyone here, I think, works.
Down
Oh,
here we
yeah.
had,
People work hard here.
the CC came down here and they took brush, and they're the ones built all those sand fences up in down to be built those sand dunes. Well, how they got them brushes? Well, they had another group over on a big piece of property, like up here in Currituck. They'd go in there and they'd clear that field out, clear all the trees out. They'd take the brush and make those fences. They'd bring them down and put them up, and there's also helping the farmers to get property to farm on.
Sure.
It's serving two purposes. And things like that doesn't hurt. I mean, you get 200 or 300 young boys not doing nothing, put them out there cleaning those fields and, and doing things that will profit people and help people.
Has anyone told you anything about how hard it is for the fishermen here?
A little bit. Why don't you tell me?
The rules and regulations, well,
They got so many laws now, you can't even go fishing.
he used to sell commercial fishing license. Do you remember when you wanted just to get a license to have a net out and fish, and you got it for $2 over at Burris Oil Company? Herbert Oden sold those fishing licenses for the state of North Carolina. That was simple, really simple.
And now it's
And then later on, see,
How much?
in
$400.
business, he just gradually built into things like it to where we came to know a little bit more about it. But we sold hunting license and sold fishing, commercial fishing license. It was fairly simple, just to give them a decal for their boat. Mostly wasn't it, to start with. They had a boat registration, and then they had to have a paper license for different things that they were going to fish for. And it got to where it was so difficult, I didn't even want to do it even then, because it had a sanitary law about it, didn't it? Something about a sanitary law that they couldn't sell certain kinds of fish, or, well, anyhow, he knows more about it now than I do, how it come down, all the regulations. And they took that out of the hands of people and put it with the department. The department sells the license, don't they?
Yeah.
When did the licensing start?
1st of July.
No, she wants to know when it first began.
Historically, at what point
It
did
had
you
to-
have to go buy a license to fish?
Well, the
Back
only
in
thing I know
the
in the
50s, I think.
60s, when we came back to live,
I
Herbert
think it
sold the
started in
$2
the 50s.
license. May have only been $1 to begin with. But that was just to, it's just to fish. I don't think the professional fishermen had to have license, did they?
The state depends on tourism right now to make their money, and they're doing everything in the world against it. They're trying to stop people from going on the beach. They're trying to stop people from fishing, even the commercial fishing, and all of that is hurting.
And over their markers for their crab pots and things like that. I lost it. I mean, I didn't stay with it, but he still
They got so
sold the
many
license
laws
and got. He
people
still gets regulation of the laws and things. I've still seen them to him because of him being in the business.
You look
down
back.
there. They're hard to
back to
understand.
the time they started it and see how all the changes have been made. Makes you right sick in your stomach to watch them.
It's taking it away from
The laws,
people. One of the really good fishermen up in Wanchese, and they made their living on the water, Etheridge. What's
They got
his
so
name?
many laws now. that-
Anyhow, he put a piece in the paper about it, about the building restrictions. He cautioned them they needed to go a little carefully because he said fishing's done with and they need work. And he said they're depending now on building, on construction. And he was talking about the people that needed it for a living. And he was telling the board to be careful about the laws they were making and not shut down too quickly on it because it's going to put them out of work. And he was a good fisherman, and they've done a lot of for that area up in Wanchese, Willie Average, yeah. And he said fishing's done with for a living. Now, he should know, because he makes his living.
Where do people gonna get their fish from inland?
It's a food supply, a great
We
food
can
supply.
go out here and get us enough to eat, but the people inland, they're not gonna get them.
Well, you're going to be hard put to go out there and get you enough out of the same.
Yeah.
There's restrictions.
Yeah, I've got nets out there right now that I wouldn't know what to do with them.
You don't know where to go fishing or how to fish. You just don't
You got
know
a certain
anymore.
place
They're
you
gonna-
go, a
you're
certain
gonna be-
place you
they
can't go,
got
and so many
people
you
that
can
stop
catch,
you.
and you can't catch this one, you can't catch that one. You catch this, you gotta throw it away, you can't be caught with it.
They were not doing it here as much when we were going to Florida down there about, 15 years ago?
Yeah, they,
Down there on, down Flamingos, where the place was. And we stood there and watched them. It was, these wildlife people were checking every boat, those little boats that come in, to see what they had. And I told him, I said, I don't want to go fishing. I didn't even want to put a line in the
if
water.
we went fishing, we went out in a boat and went fishing, we'd throw them back in the water.
You feel like that you're
But
going to
you
be in
didn't know
violation
what
of
to keep,
something.
what not to keep.
And if you throw fish back, you've killed that fish.
Right.
That fish won't live. Not once they've been out and breathed the air like that. They're not going to live. Some of them might, but not all of them. It's not. It's better not to fish. Well, that's what's going to happen.
Right.
You go out here on the beach and try to fish, like people run their nets out and pull the fish up. They don't have any idea what's in that net. They pull them up. And the ones that they can't use, it's against the law for them to keep. They have to let they lay down and rot. You can't give them to your neighbors or somebody like that to eat, those little ones. They'd rather for them rot than to give them somebody to eat.
You may have seen it in the paper where they're trying to protect the piping clover. And it's just really, I think it's something to close the beaches, because their studies have shown that they have decreased in population in this area because of the fishing, I suppose, on the beach or the vehicles.
They want to close the beaches from the Carolinas
all the way
to
around
Texas.
Texas.
Really?
All the way around the coast.
Wow.
It's not. It is not for the good of the people. That's the only thing I can say.
Look at all the
I don't
businesses.
understand it.
Especially in Florida, where they got buildings right.
You mean close the beaches to driving or fishing?
And to driving and fishing.
They
For
don't
those
somebody on
birds.
them, not even walk on them.
those birds.
Disturb the birds.
Right.
Well, I could tell them something, they wouldn't listen. That God made man, and He made these things for man. And they're trying to keep man from abusing them, I think, is what it started out to be. But it's just taking it completely away.
Sure.
And if man destroys everything, well, he's going to be destroyed too, eventually.
Sure.
That's the worst trouble getting old. If you look back and you see all that freedom you had, and now you don't have it. This is a free country if you do what you're told to do.
Right.
A lot of
If you
it
do
is,
what they want you to do, it's a free country.
they didn't have,
Otherwise, it's not.
they didn't have Social Security. But Social Security is good, but it's also a burden to the young people. It's set up the way it's set up is a burden to the young people. And the income tax, what they've done with the income tax, it's just makes you, oh, you're making how much an hour? What are you taking home? It's sad, isn't
Right,
it?
it sure is.
And they're like, we're still paying taxes at our age because we don't have it taken out. See, we don't have it.
With the business?
I have a retirement pay, and I have it taken out before it's sent to me. But he didn't,
Right.
and I pay taxes on it,
Hmm.
on his income,
Wow.
his retirement income, because, now they would deduct it, and maybe we'd get some back, but we don't get it all.
Sure.
And I don't think you can escape it. I just don't see you. Now, the rich people can. The people that are wealthy enough that they have ways of doing it and investing and
I'd rather go back where the people
loopholes,
made
they call
75
loopholes.
cents a day. And it was your 75 cent when you made it.
Right.
You could buy you lunch for 10 cents.
I believe in supporting the government to do things, but couldn't they do it with one thing, with a federal tax, say?
Right.
Instead of federal tax on this and federal tax on that and different, I know I've done tax, and I know how complicated it can get.
Sure.
And I don't think it's needed to be that way. I really don't.
Let's get into that regular people can't do their own taxes.
Can't understand it.
If you want to
And
see
you
some
don't know the
taxes,
law
look
until
at your
you've broken
telephone
it.
bill.
Oh yeah, I've done that.
And you don't know the law until you've broken it.
Right.
That's the way they find out
Sure.
what the law is. That's why some of these fishermen find out about it. They don't go out there until they break the law. They find out about it when this man walks up and tells them. And you got to go to court. And they go to court. What happens? Most of the time, Judge throws it out. Most of the time, he does. Why do it? Why go through all that? You want to know what it is? Money. It all boils down to putting money in somebody's coffin. And the federal government, where the federal government get all the money that they're using? Where'd they get it? They got it from the people. What people? People like you.
Yeah.
That's exactly where it comes from. The people that really have money can get around putting what they really ought to in. Whereas if they had a federal tax on everybody, they could do it. They could do it, but they don't want to do it.
Lord, they could take 10% of everybody's pay, regardless of how much you made and who you are. Take 10%.
It would be fair,
This
wouldn't it?
government would have more money they could handle.
That's right.
And they maybe now are asking you to contribute to the national debt, but I heard that President Bush had a plan for everybody to donate $5 when they paid their tax toward the national debt. Who would mind doing that? Not many people would mind doing it, but our national debt just goes and goes and goes.
Sure.
Well, who owes the national debt?
We do.
Sure we do. And it's going, your children on down the line's going to owe it if the world stands. They're going to be, it's not going to get better. I can't see that. I don't go around telling everybody that, but I don't see any way out of it, the way that it's being carried on. A really, really bad recession might do it. Hurricane Emily changed a lot of things down here. Dare County was, I think, a little bit hard on people before that about picking up your trash and things like that. They do that now, and they charge for it, though. Like in Florida, we pay whether we're there or not, $150 a year. But we know we're going to pay that. They're going to get more out of the one that owes the most tax. And that's the way it goes. And sometimes it's people that's making the least that owes the most tax.
I know about that.
Percentage-wise. It really is. When you take a millionaire and he owes any tax, and you come down to the man that's got $10 and owes tax, who's paid the most?
Sure.
On the gross amount.
Everybody's a millionaire down here if you own a house.
Well, they are when it comes time to pay real estate taxes, too. But still, there you go. People move from up north and say, oh, it's great down here, the taxes aren't high. But they made more money up there.
Right.
Their wages were higher. So that's the way that is.
Right.
We don't have any more pocket money because our taxes are less. But I sure can't change the world, that's for sure.
What are we going to talk about besides taxes?
You can cut all that out.
That's fine. Where did the fish used to lay their eggs? You were saying it's down around here. Where was that?
The canal area where they've built up lately.
See, never Teacher's Live Marina is.
Oh, okay.
You know where we told you?
On the sound side?
Yeah, that ferry dock, they used to call that the canal.
Okay.
That was a little body of water, natural made, up in that area. And that's where the Gooseville Gun Club started. buildings, Coast Guard Station, all
Coast
of that.
Guard Station used to be across the inlet, and now it was.
That's what they,
It was before there was any buildings
that
at all.
was Usefulness Gun Club.
Just
and then
marshy.
Lyons, he gave it to the Park
The
Service.
marsh came within that far of the water when it was high, but it would go out. It would go out just like it does on the ocean. And we could walk along in the shallow. The water's always shallow. If it weren't for the channels, boats couldn't navigate. The channels that the engineer department keeps open. It's a shallow sand. Pamlico Sand's fairly shallow anyway. But we could walk in the water. I never killed any fish, but I could see them. See those little fish just scattering everywhere. I've been told that I'm not down there anymore.
Not many. I haven't seen no crabs in the last 2 years.
None?
Well, why don't they do things like that, see?
We used to go out on
Instead of penalizing the fishermen.
down at the
Don't
dock.
catch too many
mornings.
fish.
Mornings in the summer, I could go down there and catch even half a dozen soft crabs. And
There
we had kids coming along getting crabs off the poles.
My
For the last
opinion
2
of it
years, I
is,
haven't seen a crab down there.
for people that have lived here and been raised to get their living from the water, let them do it. That's my opinion. Let them do it and not burden them down with all these rules and regulations. They're quitting. They're quitting it. That man at Wanchese knows what he's talking about. Because he knows he followed it. And he said fishing is done with as an industry. They're going to be sorry because it's a big food industry and has been. It has been ever since we can remember. And I'm sure it was before that. The fish markets up north, they can't get fish unless people in these areas catch the fish.
Did you ever hear about what was called the Seismograph Service Corporation, or geophone boats?
Was that when Standard Oil?
I think that had to do with Standard Oil.
Yes.
Yes. Did they use the Seismograph
They were searching for oil.
to look for oil? Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know much firsthand. I knew some of the boys that were hired to go out on the boats, and they were testing for oil. And they actually did get some of the people to sign, but I think that was dropped.
Okay.
I think it was dropped. It didn't go, and it didn't hold to sign the rights, you know, for them to do that, for them to drill.
Sure.
They did testing, and I never heard the results, but for sure they find oil because there'd been little spatterings of it once in a while. You would hear about like Mobil Oil or some big company like that, but we don't have that worry about it. Not long as there's a Middle East.
Sure.
All those companies are over there now. Texaco, Mobil, Exxon, all those big companies, they get their oil from over there. And Texas still has plenty of oil if they want to use it. It has plenty of oil right in Texas, not without being in the water.
Right.
And they have those oil wells out there, don't they? In the Gulf.
Well, Mexico's got all
I know
kinds
they
of
do,
oil.
but just like I was telling her, those oil fields in Texas didn't go dry.
But they'll keep them.
They didn't.
Gonna keep them
I
on
think
reserve.
they're using it sort of for reserve.
Yeah.
They have to have it. So.
But yeah, because we've had more people. And we're going to have more people as long as they keep bringing them in. I think they slack that some. I'm not against that either if people become citizens. But I don't think it's right to let people overflood the land with not being a citizen.
Right. No.
They're not taxed like we are. In fact, they're given money. How about the woman up in Avon that had come over here to stay with her daughter?
Yeah, she was at a meeting,
With Walter Jones.
political meeting, and had a congressman was on the telephone in Washington because he couldn't get there, and she wanted to know when she was going to stop getting a check every month from the government.
She didn't
And
need
she
it.
built one of those big homes, her name on.
She didn't want the money. She didn't need it. It's
She
just in
didn't need
place.
And he
It's in
said,
place.
he said the only thing you can do is just keep getting it until it quits.
Those laws are in
There's no way to
place.
stop it.
So she's a non-citizen immigrant
A
who...
non-citizen immigrant that's getting
Wow.
money.
If I'm not mistaken, they said about $800 a month.
$800 a month? Wow.
And these people, you travel up and down Interstate 95, and it's not only there, it's everywhere you go is owned by foreigners. You go in those motels, they can't even speak to you. They might find somebody in there to understand what you're talking about when you ask them for a room.
They're learning broken English.
And the government's the one that put them in there. Help them buy the motel, get them started in business.
There's a lot of things that we don't know all about that goes on, but somewhere there's some power that is trying to undermine our country, I think. And it might not be a man, it might not be a woman, it might be just a force that is in a lot of people. And they may not even be aware that they're making laws that are damaging. I'm not sure about that.
Right.
Because all the people that are making the laws are citizens, we know that. But their mind can change. Their mind can be changed so much, so easily. Seems to me like, because a lot of them have shown that in what we see on television. If you say you don't watch it, well, you're probably better off. Because we've watched what goes on in Congress. See, we've seen a lot of it, what goes on in Congress, and it's pitiful. It's pitiful how diverse they can be on something that really needs to be tended to and taken care of. I just can't understand how they have gotten this internal revenue when it was never intended to be. It was only just a tax that was to be for a short term. But once they ever get anything going, they never let it go.
Oh, sure.
Never let go of it.
When I first got my Social Security card, they used to call it the old age pension.
You're working for your old age.
And what it was to help people when they got older, their families wouldn't have to look out for them. They'd get a little bit of money from the government to help support them. But there's nothing ever mentioned. Social Security now is health, education, and welfare. That's how they've changed it.
They've changed the name now.
You can go out there right now, and you can get sick, disability, and you can draw unemployment. You can draw welfare from the government off your Social Security. And I don't think that's right. It's not what it started out to be. But I think in 1935 or 36, somewhere in there,
it was Roosevelt
it
started.
Social Security started.
My father never
And
paid
it was
Social
called
Security.
old age insurance, old age.
Old age assistance.
That's what you paid in for.
And now it's just not even enough to
But now they use it for
buy your
everything.
groceries.
Right.
If you have to retire.
There's a good chance it won't be available when I become older, and I'm paying it.
If they
Yeah.
take your
And not
money
only
and
are
put
you
it
paying
into
it,
a Social Security fund and leave it, instead of putting it into a general fund, put it in that fund, that'd be plenty of money for you and your children and everybody.
This man in Florida is 70. He's 75 now, and he's working there at Kmart. Well, he worked for a grocery store, and then he went, didn't he go to Kmart?
Yeah.
And it was a grocery store that he was working, and when he got his check, his FICA taxes on there. And he went to the office, he said, hey, I don't owe any tax, I'm retired Social Security. That doesn't make any difference. You're still paying Social Security.
You make money,
Well, you
still
do.
pay.
You do, right on. Well, it's just like you say. They tell you that. They tell the young people that they may not, that it might go broke before they get of age to use it.
But it won't be if they go ahead and put that in that fund, like a Social Security fund.
But they use it for more than just paying bona fide retirement benefits. They use it for a lot. That's not wise, you know, to have a fund and then use it for other things. It should go for what it is collected for. And a lot of churches get in trouble, I think, over things
Well,
like
North
that.
Carolina's got that 5-cent road tax to help keep the roads up, but they put it in a general fund. Now they don't have money to build the roads. Where's the 5 cents go out on the tax?
Now,
was gonna get road tax,
We're wasting
and
our
people
time.
voted down, said if they put it in a special fund for the roads, they'd vote for it. So they still haven't got the 5-cent tax. But, it's the
Death
same thing
tax.
with the lottery.
I don't
get
think
a lottery,
they have a
what would they
birth
do?
tax. I don't think you have to pay a
I don't know. I'm surprised you don't.
Death taxes, though, are pretty steep, I guess, for people
Well,
that...
nobody's thought of it yet. That could be why your telephone tax said others. That others is for things that they can't think of to put on there.
And we had a man in church one time that thought miscellaneous meant something you couldn't give an account for. If you spent the church money, you know, for things, and you write down what it's for,
If you didn't have a record of it, you just put it on the miscellaneous.
that's what he thought it was for. It was for things you didn't have a whole lot of money went out for, just a little odd and end thing. He didn't understand that. You didn't write down that you bought maybe a notebook or a pencil for that month.
Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time
We're
today.
taking your time.
No, I enjoy talking with you, and I'm
One of these days, I'm gonna get that
appreciate you.
recorder.
His nephew, that they brought it up, you know about it, and is your grandnephew, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there was a man that came here, I reckon maybe 10, 15 years
Yeah.
ago, Little Angel, and he did a lot of talking to Richard Jones that had the monitor. He did a lot of talking. Well, he said some things that,
It wasn't true.
well, he did, but he also said things about his childhood that marked him for not even knowing anything unless he had heard it. Just like me, there's a lot of things I've heard. But he did not know Tom Angel, and we did.
right.
And he lived up in Brigands Bay, Little Angel did. Well, they were talking about Tom, you know, making ice cream, and somebody wanted to know, well, where was Tom? Where did he live? And his grandnephew had said Brigands Bay. Now, so that's how
Sure.
things get things mixed up. Well, I reckon all of history's that way, a lot of it.
I think so. I think pretty much all of it is.
She's an angel.
Well, yeah, I was
She's
named after
after
that family. It was a family name, really. But they came here because of the lighthouse service. They weren't born here. But Miss Angel, she had, they were well-to-do. And she had a nice home, a big home. And she raised Tom, and he was her servant. I mean, he dressed in his black pants and white coat. He was a servant and a respectful person, very respectful. And she left him in her will that place,
Okay.
the estate.
I didn't quite understand that connection. All right, so he was the servant of Ms. Angel,
Yeah.
and then that's how he inherited the
She brought
estate.
him here as a boy.
They give him their name, Angel.
They did. His name was Tom. And there's a graveyard there, and I'm not real sure, but that might be where he is buried. Is on that property anyway.
Where again was this house? Or is it still standing?
No, it burned down.
It burned down. There's a small one was put in place of it, and I don't know if that's still there or not, but there are other houses around. You know where the campground below us is? You'd have to go.
If you go down here to Fulcher's Lane and go up there, that'd take you right around on it.
Okay.
All that property in on the left there is the
Is that what's called
property.
Congress Way? Is that what they call Congress Way?
Congress Way's down on the beach.
I don't know what name it is over in there, but
Fulcher
to
Lane.
get to that graveyard, you'd have to go down by Arnold's.
You can't get through there,
You
but.
can't get back to the graveyard? You can
Well,
walk
you
to it.
can, yeah.
You can walk to it. I think I might like to do that sometime. But my father was born in the house that was just down beyond that across from Robinson's store, and that was sold not too long ago, and they tore that down. I don't know if he was born there. I think he was. It was his father who lived there. His grandfather lived where the sign took the places. They're all going before.
But you're right over there if you go up Fulcher's Lane, which is about the first blacktop after you go out hit the main highway to the left. You go up it when you make a sharp right turn, all of that in front of you is Angel property.
Okay.
Now his grandfather owned down there where O'Neill. Joey's O'Neill.
Yeah.
Or married his father. His mother was Grant.
My grandfather owned the
He owned
property
in there,
Frisco, you know.
and Miss Angel's name is on the deeds for joining him. But there was a road between them, a little road, car path. And cars later used it, but it wasn't a road to be used very much, just for the people that lived at the end of it. And I think they closed that off. I'm not sure about that. Since I've been back to Hatteras, I haven't moved around very much. We worked all the time.
Right, sure.
And all I did was just travel the beaten path. I never went off in the areas in the graveyards or anything, but there are people that are doing it.
I could walk around out that way and tell you every little thing where every little bridge used to be.
Jackie Willis has done a lot in the graveyards, going
all
around to
your
the graveyards.
Houses here was built on little lumps. And they have a little footbridge going over to them. And just about every house had a bridge going to
There
it.
was a pond or a natural pond, not dug out. There was a natural pond almost with
Just
every
like over
house.
there in that marshland.
With every house?
Almost in
Huh.
this area, because we were lower than what, further up. It may not have been that way all the way up the road, because it was higher up there. Now, our daughter lives and Alan lives all the way up to the end, right on the bay. And they have that property from their house all the way back into the bay, belongs to that family. And that was the end of the natural road, too. Because in the middle.
Back over where y'all used to live, you had to get about 4 bridges to get to your house.
That way we did. Now, the road itself would stay pretty dry. The road that the cars used, went all the way around. But that crossed the slash down there.
Went right by the,
But to get to our house, the shortcut, you did have to go across those bridges.
across one, right there by the casket house.
Now, our yard was high, but it was because Daddy had built it up. But it was with sand from the beach side. And people were allowed to get it. They weren't restricted. You can get it now with a permit if you take it from the right place, can't you?
Yeah.
Beach sand?
I think so. Probably not to fill with, but
Right.
Beach sand is something that'll come right back.
if you get it from the right area.
And sand it don't dissolve like mud. It just moves around. And you go down there and dig a hole, and it ain't long before that hole's filled in.
We were used to always going to the beach and getting anything we wanted. And when we went to Norfolk to live up in, was it Ocean View? We went down there one Sunday and was going to get some sand for the children to play.
Yeah.
Sandbox. And we were right down to the water, and these people came out and told us that that was personal property.
Huh.
We weren't used to that.
Yeah.
We always had access to the beach, and then when the Park Service got the agreement, they didn't stop people.
Sure.
They didn't stop people that lived here. They've had to have regulations here because of outside people is what it's been. But it hurts the ones that are here because there's no, they can't draw a line now. It's too much. They can't draw a line and say, hey, you belong here and you don't. They can't do that. And they have to make those laws. I realize
It
some
hurts
of
the
them.
laws when somebody lived here like we have all of our lives, and we could do this, we could do that. And now you go out there and do it. First thing you know, you're arrested for doing something. You can't even go out here now and build you a little shed or put down a pole. You can't do nothing without getting a permit.
Sure.
I can tell you how it's changed back
Boy,
in
right this morning told me somebody gave him a house trailer. And he had it moved. It cost him $8,000 in permits to get that trailer moved from one place to another.
Wow.
And to
Just
be
permits.
able to live there. You know, when you
Think I bought a trailer for that.
built that first building,
Unreal.
1965, you didn't even have to have a permit. Then when you started a little bit more, that man came down and told you needed your permit. and you got your permit and posted it, and he came to inspect, and he told you that you couldn't have your 2x4s closer together?
I put them 12 inches apart. What I was doing, I knew there was a lot of hurricanes there, and was doing it to support the flooring too up top. And he said, that's not the code. I said, well, the code says 16 or better. And I said, to me, 12 inches is better than 16. He said, well, he said, do it the way you want to do it. And he left.
Yeah, you asked him though, you said,
Yeah, I said, where are you going to be at? We have a hurricane. He said, up in Mateo Woods. I said, well, I'm going to be upstairs. I said, I'm going to build it the way I want to build it.
That's funny, but that's how it has changed. It's had to, though. See, back when people built their houses, there was no such thing as a building permit because they built it for themselves.
Right.
But they pay taxes because they give it in.
You build it.
Now they can get your taxes from your building permit. You don't have to. You do give it in, but you don't have to. I mean, they could do it from your building permit. Because you get the price of what you're intending to build, put on your building permit.
Okay.
I look at it sometimes. The building permits are issued for.
Well, of course, this building right here has got a whole lot more material in it than this end has. Because I know that end there gets the hardest winds. And it's supported and built better.
People used to build.
There's an extra nail in it.
They built to stand the storm.
Sure.
That's what they built for, and the houses did. They didn't have a building inspector. But the reason for a building inspector is to protect the people from the contractor.
Right, yes.
Because it's not the person from himself. It's
Sure.
They would have to do that. They've made some funny things. They've done some funny things. Some of these contractors, they've got ideas about what's best, and the test of time's going to show that it's not. Some of the things that they want, that they think's better. They used to use a solid side to come all the way down, and they say it's better to split it.
Because it's easier.
That's the reason for it.
It's easier.
It's easier to put the way material comes.
I put in a septic tank down at the dock, and I did it the way I wanted to do it. Of course, didn't have to have it. Well, we had to have a permit, but they told me to go ahead and do it like I wanted to do it. And I never had a problem.
He put it in short sections.
68, I think.
He laid it big.
Never had no problem.
And short.
And now
gravel.
they want you to spend $10,000 or $15,000 to put one in, which is, it's just, it's stupid the way they want to do it.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey, I've got a bunch of people.
Bunch of people. This is a Burris boy.
Hi.
It's Alan's boy.
Alan, yeah, you came in and got a phone, didn't you? Yeah.
What are you guys doing? What are y'all doing?
They're just talking to
Give her
this
life
nice
history.
girl.
She's gonna write a big novel on us.
We had a letter from someplace that wanted all these different things, and I told Daniel, I said, sure, I could do that. I could advertise for that, and I could make me up a nice book and make some money on it.
Sure.
Go
Yeah, you should
Get
do.
that book, let her read it. That Richard Jones wrote.
The Monitor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll let her have it.
Down here, people just get sick anyway.
Yeah, they do some lots of people things in the way you would.
You go off somewhere, bring a bump, or something like that. You never got them unless somebody went off and brought it back to you.
So the general health was pretty good overall?
The general health was really good, but like I told you, people died early from exposure.
Sure.
Some of the women maybe from childbirth. That there were more women in our research in genealogy. There were more husbands with 2 wives than there were women with 2 husbands. You could hear that much more. With 2 sets of children.
Right.
By the woman. You'll hear people say, well, they had the same father but different mothers. You hear that over and over.
Right.
And that tells you something. That was childbearing.
The men were smarter than the women. They make them get up mornings and start the fire in the old cook stove.
Well, they didn't any of them live to
They
be
lay where it's warm.
what we call old.
No, I'd say 35-year-old man.
I guess my father, his people died in their 50s, probably, 40s, late 40s. And he was only in his 50s.
There's more people dying in their 50s. And people used to retire at 55. And very few of them made it to 57.
Really?
I had one sister and 4 brothers. And 2 brothers and me are still living, and we all got to be past 70 except that one brother. The oldest brother died at 43. But he had high blood pressure, and he died with a brain aneurysm, I think. But he was exposed a lot, wasn't he? More than we were. He left school and went to work with my father. And he, I'm sure, had it much harder than we did in that respect. That might not be what killed him, but it didn't help, I'm sure, because he was waterman. He worked on water all the time. That's all he ever knew. And he was fishing on the beach, and they sent him to put the anchor out, to anchor the net. And they had the net on the shore like an anchor. And they said he ran up the beach with the anchor and fell. And that's what he was dead when they got to him. So he was with my father fishing a net out when he fell dead. And he said to that boy that was with him that day, he said he'll come out of it. And he said, no, he won't. He's dead. And he died in his health. He looked real healthy. Frederick looked healthy, didn't he? But he always said, I want to die the same way. That's what he always said. And Daddy was 53 and Frederick was 43. But I think it's great to say that we all got past 70.
Yeah.
Death don't have no respect to persons. I mean, now, that quick.
Well, you can see all kinds of markers, you know, for little ones and big ones and old ones and all ages, but the most of the children that died here died from babies.
I find out how quick it was down in Florida when I had that blood clot.
Yeah, it can happen.
She got up and went to the bathroom. And I sat on the side of the bed and changed my underwear, and I reached over and got an undershirt. We're going to put that on. I never did get it on. Man, that elephant stomped me and kicked me down on the bed. I grabbed that undershirt and started wiping the sweat off me.
After
she come out and saw what was going on. But I had that blood clot, just cut my breath off. I could breathe, but it was hard.
You know what I did? I went straight out through the house to the kitchen, picked up the phone, and got a couple of aspirin, and took him back with me and told him, I said, you're going to have to move to where I can get to you, because he was close to the bed. And I said, you're going to have to move around and get one. And he did, and I gave him the aspirin. I put a healing cloth on him that I had been given, and said a prayer, and dialed the phone 911. And in 20 minutes, he was on his way to the hospital.
Wow.
That quick.
Great.
That quick they got. Well, they weren't very far from us. And that's the best part about picking your house out in Florida, getting it near a virgin.
Yeah.
He says out there where we have our house is a elephant graveyard.
Elephant graveyard.
The whole people. They die out. They go out there and get them a house, and they stay there until they die.
Well, they sell. Some of them sell. But they sell to another old person.
How old were we when we went out there?
6. Let's say it's been.
We were little boys and girls to them. And
60 years old I was.
Those people, 80, 90-year-old living out there.
Oh, I admired those people. Oh my goodness, there was a woman there that was in her 80s, and she cleaned her house, and
one man, one of them was blind, the other one couldn't hear.
They were having.
And he had him, bought him a little chainsaw, was going to trim a shrubbery. And he had that thing cranked up, and she was supposed to have been out there telling him what to do, because he couldn't see. And he was cutting them down. And the time she got there, he said, well, you should have told me. She said, oh, you didn't give me time to get out here.
He had live oaks that everybody would give their arm and a leg for. He had those live oaks that they had bought and put there.
Yeah, they were beautiful.
And he cut them down. And he said to Dana when they spited, you know, he said, you thought I ruined them, didn't you?
They didn't want the leaves falling into gutters. She'd climb a ladder and get up and clean them gutters.
And that doctor told her, he said, Mary, you're not a teenager you'd have to admire those people the way that they went.
Sure.
But he couldn't hear nothing, or couldn't see, and she couldn't hear,
She had one ear to
and they'd help each other.
They stayed with the doctors, but they finally sold their house because their children wanted them home, and they lived in Missouri, and their children wanted them close by. And the last news I heard from them, they were living in a assisted living apartment. But still to themselves, but they were amazing. Not only they were nicest people.
We were at a Shoney's drive-in one time, and we was standing waiting to be seated, and here's coming this old man in. I call him old man. He was all humped over, and his wife had her hand in his belt. And there he was walking and pulling her behind him. And when they went in, I guess the waitress knew him or something, because she took him right on through the crowd.
They were helpless.
And went in and seated him.
Helpless, really.
But that poor fella, she was guiding him, and he was pulling her. I don't think he could see.
It's easier living there. It's a lot easier living because of the elements that just beat you to pieces here. The changes is what gets me. It's not being out, because I don't have to go. I go out, but that's not necessary. But it's the way the wind goes around back and forth. It doesn't, I don't reckon it bothers you quite as bad when you're younger, but it might, and you don't pay any attention to it.
But when you get older,
It
you grow up
changes your
together.
moods.
Okay.
Because you have mood swings.
Yeah.
And you know, some days you feel better than other days.
Sure.
A lot of it's the weather.
That's, I think of it briefly sometimes.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah. There's nothing you can do anything about it.
No. Just go with flow.
That's part about getting older and staying together. We've been together now 57 years. I pretty well know what she's thinking. She knows what I'm thinking. And that's the worst part about it.
You become as one
She knows what I
eventually.
think.
It might not happen right as it's supposed to, but it might not. You do. If you stick together, you become as one. You really do.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is. It's intended.
Granddaughter told me the other day, she said, Bobo, you need a shave. And she said, Granny don't like whiskers. I said, no, that's why I've got it. I said, Granny's always after me, and I have to keep her pushed away from me. And I said, now growing whiskers, she's staying away from me.
What you got?
She said, I was crazy.
Well,
I said, I keep her away from me now, so she don't want to hug me or mess with me because I got whiskers.
how did you end up down here?
I had come here for the first time on a visit